This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. This is a show about ideas, people, and behaviors that are considered inappropriate, out of bounds, or beyond the pale. The things you're not supposed to talk about if you're a school teacher, a college professor, a businessman, a politician, a parent, a neighbor, or even a podcast host. These are the things you're not supposed to say or even think if you're a good liberal, a good conservative, or a good citizen. Each week, I'll interview a person who has something bad to say. They might be a journalist or a professor. They might be a porn star or a drug dealer. They might just be an ordinary person with an ordinary job who doesn't care about the rules of polite society. I'm not interested in breaking the rules just to be a troublemaker. I'm interested in people who break the rules of conventional thought and to expand the scope of what is possible to say in our society. I'm interested in people who make me think. Right now, the Unregistered podcast is supported entirely by listeners. So, if you like the show, I need your help to keep it going. You can go to thaddeusrussell.com/support, where you can make a financial contribution of as much as you want. You can also support the show by visiting thaddeusrussell.com/Amazon whenever you want to make a purchase on Amazon.com. I wasn't sure what to make of this week's guest when I sat down to talk with him. That was partly because his biography seemed to be full of contradictions. He was a U.S. Marine and a cop in the Baltimore Police Department, but he's now one of the leading left-wing activists and public intellectuals on criminal justice. I was also confused about his politics. He sounded like a socialist, but some of his core ideas were either libertarian or classically conservative. When I found out who Michael A. Wood Jr. was and where he came from, his ideas started to make sense to me. And what I expected to be a conversation full of conflict turned out to be one of surprising convergence. Michael is the founder and CEO of Veterans Stand. So in 2014, after Mike Brown was killed in Ferguson, Missouri, like some people, I wanted to kill cops. Like, I really wanted to kill cops. I hated cops. I always hated cops, but then it went to another level for me. And I really believed during that summer and for a good year or two after that, that certainly there were problems with the law, but I thought that the first thing to be addressed was not just sadist, racist cops, sadistic, racist cops, but that we needed to make them accountable, actually, both by prosecuting them, but actually, by shooting them. And so that was 2014, and I held on to that. Those videos coming out, man, over the year after that, it just seemed like one after another. Everybody knows this. Eric Garner and Walter Scott's a little bit later. And actually the one that got me the most was the guy in St. Louis, whose name I'm forgetting now. But he was clearly mentally ill, probably schizophrenic. He was like bugging some corner store owner in St. Louis and was obviously mentally ill. He was sort of yelling at space. And he was unarmed, but he had like a butter knife or a kitchen knife. I don't even think it was serrated. And he just started walking toward the cops who had rolled up and had pulled out their guns on him. He just took a few steps toward them and they just blasted him. And it's all on video. You can see the whole thing. Man, did I cry about that one. And I thought that, if we start to shoot back, if anybody starts to shoot back, they might be more accountable. Now, it's a very long introduction, but I have changed my mind about that, actually. I think that's not a great way to go. And I don't mean morally, I just think it's not productive. I think I have realized in the last year or so that there's a deeper set of problems or a better way to go about addressing this issue of police brutality and mass incarceration. But anyway, I still kind of hate cops. And so I have sitting in front of me a former cop. This is Michael A. Wood Jr., who was a Baltimore City police officer and detective.
I was a detective, a shift commander of different units. I spent over a decade.
And you did part of that service in some of the worst neighborhoods in Baltimore, right?
As a reflection of how much I've changed perspective, even thinking the words Polished of Baltimore is something that kind of hesitates and make me stop in my mind that those places are that.
How about poorest and most violent?
Sure.
Yeah. Like West Baltimore, right?
West and East, yeah.
Yeah. And then the other people I tend not to be very fond of at all are servicemen in the military, in particular volunteers, in particular those who volunteer to do the actual combat. And Michael is also a former Marine. Sorry, Marines. I know you're never a former Marine, but I think you actually don't mind being called a former Marine, right?
It's funny because my friend Tony, who's a ex-Marine as well, as you should say, notice I said ex-Marine, we had this discussion recently. And yeah, I mean, I don't like the idea of once a Marine, always a Marine. Who told you that? Like, I stopped being a Marine. I'm an ex-Marine. If you tell me to drop and give you 10, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, there's like a mysticism attached to the Marines or something. I guess that's part of it.
And we're taught to not be that way. So I kind of feel like it's insulting us as Marines who, when we train to do things, we operate as units and we do the right thing and we stand up against authority. Like, that's built into our coding, that if a superior officer is telling you to do something that is unsafe for your team, like, you literally have the authority to stand up and say, no, this is not what we're doing. This is unsafe for my team. Really? So it's insulting to us.
I didn't know that. Is that unlike the other services? You're allowed in the Marines to do that?
I think all combat operations would be that way. I can't speak for others, but in any combat squad, any O3, which is infantry, or any special ops, I mean, yeah, of course. Every officer is a safety officer.
I didn't know that. But yeah, I definitely want to talk about that, your history in the Marines and the cops too. But I found out about you like most people did. I think it was at May. It was like 2 years ago exactly, right? Or
June 2015?
Yeah, okay, yeah, pretty close. When you not one day, it was right after the Freddie Gray killing, I think, right? Wasn't it during the Freddie Gray?
Shortly after.
Yeah. You sent out a string of tweets about what you had seen as a Baltimore cop, in which you basically just aired out the dirty laundry and reported on some of the worst things you had seen cops do in that city over your years in service there. And, a lot of us paid attention to it, especially those of us who hated cops and wanted to kill them. And part of me said, well, here we go. I don't think anyone had ever seen this happen. I'm not sure it's ever really happened. I'm not sure an ex-cop has ever really thrown that much out there at once. And it was quite stunning. And I thought, whoa, I like this guy. Even though I didn't know you were a former Marine at that point, but I thought, maybe there's an ex-cop I can handle. Then you and I had some fights, actually. Do you remember this? Do you remember we had an argument on Twitter once?
I don't remember an early one. I remember the recent one, which kind of brought us here, which I think is totally something I have a problem with, where even philosophically, like, I don't want you to appeal to authorities. But at the same time, like, I'm like, I don't listen to these other people when it comes to policing. They don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, you're talking about how you called me out just recently, a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, no, I'm talking about this was like a year or two ago.
No, I don't remember. But I imagine I just did something that was probably inappropriate.
No, it had nothing to do with policing, or almost nothing. And it was kind of a stupid argument, although I was right. But no, it was about food deserts in the cities. Yeah. And I was saying it was a myth, and what I did was, and you were fighting me, and I said, okay, give me an address in Baltimore. And you would give me an address, and then I would Yelp it, and I would find a grocery store within walking distance, and then I would tell you that. This is all on Twitter. And then you would say, I remember you one point said, dude is Yelping, like as if I was like some yuppie using yuppie research to prove a yuppie point, but it's fine. We're good.
I'm going to still continue to say that's a yuppie doing yuppie research, but okay.
Guilty as charged then. I don't need to talk about food deserts today.
Well, no, it's okay. It's just that when you Yelp that thing that's called a grocery store, it's just simply not.
Oh, no, like it was a corner store. I understand. Believe it or not, I did grow up.
I spent my first 6 months walking the neighborhood right there where Freddie Gray was killed. So I have this weird circle where I come back. I begin in Freddie Gray's neighborhood and I end in Freddie Gray's neighborhood.
I didn't know that. Okay.
So when I was there for those 6 months, I didn't eat. So as a foot patrol officer,
right. You said that to me. Yeah, that's right.
The only time I would ever eat is when I would sneak out and have to walk about 12 blocks to go to McDonald's because there was no way I was going to eat any of the food that was remotely available anywhere where I could walk.
Yeah. I mean, I assume your larger point here is poverty, right? It's about poverty, and there's poverty in these
access to resources, period.
Yeah, and so that's connected to crime in certain ways, and we will certainly talk about that, and there's no doubt about that in my mind that those people in those neighborhoods are poorer than everyone else. Yes, there's no question about that. It's just about access to food. And it's really, to me, it's like it gets a little overhyped, in particular because poverty in America is so much less than the rest of the world.
Yeah, on a global concept, we're saying
like
ridiculous
everyone's
things.
a 1%, right? Pretty much every American is 1% in the 1% globally. Anyway, we don't have to go down there. So, yeah. Then I started to notice you using language and talking about certain things, political ideas. It sounded to me, so I don't know if you know, I was raised by Trotskyists, by revolutionary socialists in Berkeley in the 1960s and 70s. So I know the left really, really well. And I can just, it's almost an ethnic thing, right? It's like there's a certain way of talking, a certain way of being, there's sort of cultural norms, behaviors, et cetera. And I saw you and listened to you and watched you do your thing. And I was like, this guy is of the left in that particular way. And I don't mean liberal, I mean left. Wasn't clear to me exactly which tendency or strain or organization, but there was clearly you had contact, deep contact, and been influenced by somebody, some people, some group on the left. Maybe that's wrong, I don't know. But, you sounded like a socialist, which is all fine. But like a lot of the people I hang out with now don't get that because they didn't grow up around the left, so they didn't understand that. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. What's this guy about? It's so strange. How do you go from being a cop one minute to being a socialist the next? So kind of, Michael, I do want to ask you that. Let's start there. How did you go from being a Baltimore cop to being, are you a socialist? Do you identify as such?
I don't identify with any of these things. I don't know any of Trotsky's writing. I don't know any of Marx's writing. I don't know any of the far right, Hitler's writing. I know none of these things. I don't know Black history. I grew up in America. I never heard a thing that Malcolm X ever said until people said, oh, you said something that sounds just like him. And I don't know what my process really was to get there. So I grew up in the normal America that you think of in rural America, where it's like middle class, lower middle class. I had mixed races where I was in Section 8 myself, or subsidized housing area of the neighborhood. And we just kind of grew up living life. Police didn't mess with us. We were all poor, but it was kind of just this, nobody really thought about politics and what you're doing. So TV teaches me that to be a hero, to do the right things, that you're going to be the Marine. You're going to be the cop. I watched cops on TV as they chased down everybody. I watched Dukes of Hazzard as they ran around running from the police and having fun. So it's like you have this alpha male adrenaline kind of you can go do these good things and it's like almost a sport. Like you're an athlete of death. And that gets you out of poverty. That gets you into college. That gets you all these things that I felt inadequate about because of being poor and the expectations of society.
Yeah, so I was very curious about where you come from, and I couldn't find any information online. But so yeah, what town are you from?
The one I could most say I'm from is Abingdon, Maryland. And that is just a suburb of Baltimore that's kind of right to the outskirts. Baltimore is an incorporated city. So whereas you think of Los Angeles as this big thing, thinking of Baltimore would be a really small, only thinking about downtown. So the suburbs are kind of what a lot of people would think of as part of the city, but they're not in Baltimore. So in that town of Abingdon, I don't know. It's it's a 95 town on the East Coast. If you've been to a 95 town on the East Coast, which means anywhere up that 95 corridor, I-95, all the towns right off of 95 are the freaking same.
But so that area, am I right that it's gone from rural to suburban? Over the last like 20, 30 years?
Yeah, I mean, you could easily say that. When I went into the Marine Corps, I had farmland and rolling hills of corn around me. And when I came back, it was like a huge metropolis in Bel Air, Maryland, which is a huge, like just popped out of nowhere kind of city. And that's a real right-wing area of Maryland now. So I grew up in completely white ideology, but in mixed races. So white ideology in family and in politics. And when I say white, I'm just mean like typical American colonialism, capitalism, America is the greatest thing since sliced bread kind of ideal. I was told that like cops were good in the city because they kept the monkeys in the borders and didn't let them come out into the counties. And so those are the mentalities that are around you. And that's what I was brought up in. So I mean, what do you know besides what you're taught?
Sure.
And then I went out into the real world when I was 17 and tried to get out of poverty by joining the Marine Corps.
Okay. So how about your parents? What were they politically?
I would say largely on my mother's side, apolitical. They would be all right-wing conservative ideology, but whether they actually could formulate what that meant, I don't think so at all. My mother would have been apathetic, and my father's side of the family is wealthy, and they are really wrapped up in that capitalistic ideology where they will step on people and they don't really care. I was like the black sheep to them. So I kind of didn't really like that side from the very beginning, just growing up in a poor neighborhood and seeing that juxtaposition felt ugly.
So wait, so your family wasn't wealthy, or?
I live with my mother.
Oh, I see.
Right. So,
okay. Another divorced kid.
Yeah, so I'm a latchkey
just like
kid,
me,
like everybody else in our generation
that
didn't have fathers, and now
we're not of the same generation, but we're close.
Of course,
I'm
we
a
are.
lot.
How old are you?
I'm a lot older than you are.
You can't give it up now.
I'm 51.
Oh, no way.
Oh yeah.
That's when people make fun of me for looking young. All right, so you got that in your boat. 37.
Yeah. So okay. So when did your parents get divorced?
When I don't even have a recollection.
What do you mean?
Of them being together.
That's like the formative moment. That's the pivotal moment for us.
No,
you have to know the day.
So I don't know.
So you were so young.
I was so young. I have no memory.
So you're like a toddler.
Yeah.
Oh, you really
I never
don't
knew
remember
anything else. I'm not one of those things that's like, my dad didn't love me, because to me it's like, well, I don't even know that concept of what you're talking about. I don't care about that.
Yeah, I was 5 and my brother was 2, and I think that actually saved him. I think that's why he's much less bothered by it and was much less affected by it. I mean, he was affected by it just by the fact that we were raised by my father. Unlike most kids of divorce like you who were raised by the mother, we, for various weird reasons, were raised by my father, and that was the problem. But yeah, my brother doesn't process it. He doesn't have it's not a thing for him, right? 'Cause just like you, he had no experience with it. Whereas I remember exactly the day and what happened on that day.
But you lost something.
Oh yeah, exactly. Right,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah. If you could just like delete the memory, I wonder how I would be. Probably much better off. So okay, and you lived with your mom. Did you see your dad much?
Yeah, I mean, off and on enough that you go on weekends and you do things like that where, but I'm going to this family that like has a pool and they have tennis courts and they have volleyball courts and they live out in suburbia and they don't give a fuck about anybody else but themselves. And I just was always felt like, what is this?
So your mom lived in a poorer,
definitely
working class.
Lower class, yeah.
Okay, working class area. So that was Abingdon?
Yeah, it's Abingdon.
And your dad was in, what was it called?
Oh, I have no idea what town he was in at that time. They generally live in like Jarrettsville, Madonna, Falston areas.
Rich white town.
Yeah, rich white town.
Capital R,
right.
capital W. That's interesting. So there's like a resentment of the upper class right away.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the difference is quite obvious in how society is operating from those different perspectives.
Yeah. Yeah. What bothered you? I'm not pressing you here. I'm really genuinely curious about this. Like so you were bothered by your father's wealth and his family's wealth and their attitudes about it. They didn't care about the poor. Is that it?
They didn't care about anybody. I mean, they're a capitalistic mentality where you do what you do and that's your measurement of success. Like even now, like I've had, because I mean, if that's a right-wing family, obviously I kind of get a thrill out of that. When everybody's going to search wood in the future, they're going to find me, not you. And so like, I don't know. Like I just love the idea that their name, that they have this capitalistic mentality, and now their name will be associated with what you perceive, and society will perceive it as being extreme left, which I guess by any definition I'm extreme left and certainly not liberal.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you are actually, but you seem sort of socialist. But we'll get into that.
Sure.
So you had this resentment of them, and you also had this, I guess you would say, critique, right? That they were out for themselves, individualistic. Is that it?
Yeah, of course.
They didn't care about it. What would you have wanted them to do?
I mean, share their wealth of some way, shape, and form. To I don't know. It's just like this general looking down upon people when, especially, they have their money from that old money where it's.
Is that what they were?
They were contractors. So, but when contracting, when it first started like 40 years ago in these growing areas, they didn't have like any regulations. So they made shit products that they sold for way too much. And, it's not like they gave a product that you should be proud of. And my father was different than that, but that's where the money came from. And like, that's not like you sold people shit, and like you look down upon them because you manipulated the system and you think value is money. Like when I shed them, like for like, officially, like, kind of, it was like I would get these threats like, we'll write you out of the will, and it's like, that shows how little you know me. I don't give a fuck about your money or your power or your house. Like, what do you like? This is not a measurement of value or success or anything.
Did you said you officially shed them?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a letter.
Oh, really?
To all of them, just kind of like, this was my positions. If you take these counter positions, then that's fine. It's just that understand that this is how I see that. I have no other way or choice but to see it this way, and I'm not going to be associated with you, period.
When did you write that letter?
Oh, that was 5 to 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, way before any of this.
Yeah, but so like you were a cop then, right?
Yeah.
When you were a cop, you wrote that letter to them.
Right.
Yeah. So that's curious. Like there ain't too many cops who think like you. Am I right?
I don't know. I kind of think that I'm just kind of the tip of a spear of millennials. Like I'm on the very edge of that, and I'm at the very edge of having this magical cell phone device in my hand when I was still like understanding what computers are and how to get into the digital world. And that access to information, I really think, has changed us. And I'm just an early person in it because of circumstances.
But that particular form of left politics has circulated among police officers because of social media?
No, I think that they want to do the right things. And what I talk about, they recognize as not their enemy. They're just trapped in a system where they're that same poor person, really, for the most part, that bought into this classism and thinks that the other poor class is their enemy. And that's a manipulation. I mean, they've been manipulated to think that crime in that lower class neighborhood is their enemy. So they feel that. They just don't understand it because I think they intentionally choose us as uneducated.
Oh, you're the tip of the spear. You're the pioneer among cops. I mean, I'm not making fun of you, honestly. That's what you're theorizing or suggesting you're just the beginning of something.
Wait, I mean, I had a safety net because of my pension.
So but you think you're suggesting that there will be more cops in the future who think like you.
Totally, and I think my Standing Rock adventure was absolute evidence of that.
Oh, Standing Rock. All right. Yeah. Let's talk about that in a second, but or if I forget, remind me. So, all right. So, but I just want to get this thing because I'm really, really curious about class and about people's feelings about class in this country. Always have been. When I was a Marxist, and now that I'm not a Marxist, I'm just as interested. So you wanted your parents and their family to share the wealth, like through taxation or donations or what?
No, I don't give a damn how you do it. But what?
Meaning just like give it to the state or give it to people directly through charity?
I have no idea. It's just the juxtaposition was clear of that separation. And there's something just gross about the separation, let alone their individual mentalities and opinions of other people.
But to give away the money would be sort of to be taking care of the poor, right? In a way?
No, like I don't see it that way.
So then what's the purpose of giving away the money?
I don't think rich people even give their fair share for what they take.
Right.
So it's like they had this idea that they accumulated all these things off of their individual efforts, which was just patently false. It was my friends and people I knew that were building the road that they drove their construction vehicles on to get to the construction site to do the thing. So it's like you never paid that portion of taxes. So you have built your empire on the backs of other people. And if you don't respect that chain and that circle that you will also can have continual wealth for yourself, you need to make sure that you have that backbone. Like, it's a self-destructive system. I don't see how it can succeed in the long run.
How is it self-destructive?
So if you just accumulate all of the things at the top and you are taking from the poor, eventually you just are logically going to get to the point where there's no resources to take from the poor, or you're going to get to the point where the poor have had enough and they're going to say, no, we don't work for England anymore.
Mm-hmm. And they'll rise up and take it, take the stuff and cut off the heads of the rich.
Sure. And like, I'm corporate social responsibility theory. I'm a business major. So like, I understand in the long term, if you got to think in long terms, these short term mentalities are moronic.
Yeah, no. I'm sort of getting at like the psychology of this. Like, what is it that bothers you and what did you want them to do, right? Is it, so sharing the wealth.
Okay. So like, I wanted them to not go on vacation and buy a yacht when I saw a homeless dude in Baltimore.
Totally. But
that's just, I don't know what that means.
Right. Yeah. Well, see, this is the thing. And this is what animated me for much of my life. And I still fight it, by the way. It's still in me. But it certainly animates most or all of the left, right? That basic feeling, right? It's just, they see that. And I'm not making a claim about whether it's right or wrong or stupid or smart. And there's just this base emotional reaction to that kind of, I guess you would call inequality, right? That then takes them on a whole trajectory ideologically, right? They build an idea, and every ideology does this. They build an ideology around that feeling, I think.
I'm going to dismiss that it's a feeling, because for me, it was practical reality. If I had conformed to...
it is a feeling, because you saw a thing and were bothered by it, right?
Yes, but it became more than being bothered, because if I had subscribed to their mentality and went to their side of the fence, I would not have been sitting in an environment where I was being trained to risk my life and kill other people for the profits of that same system. So to me, I saw my friends risking their life, and who I was trying to fight for, they were the ones that were going to die. It was nobody from that side of the fence that was going to die.
Okay. All right. So you enlisted in the Marine Corps at what age?
17.
Oh, and why? What was your thinking then? Were you still ideologically aligned with your dad's side of the family? Is that why you did it?
No. I don't know if I was processing enough at that time.
You're 17. Who can process when they're 17?
One of my embarrassments from that time that I feel now is like, I was a huge fan of Rage Against the Machine, and like the things they taught me. And I observed like the education system telling me bullshit, that Columbus Day is not real, what was happening to Leonard Peltier, these kind of things that it's like, I see this world that they're telling me, but yet I still succumbed to my own success metrics and inadequacies to go ahead and still become the system, become the machine.
This is I think why I'm so interested in you. It's like there's contradictions or paradoxes that are especially interesting with you, right? So I don't know of any other Rage Against the Machine teenage fan who enlists in the military, right? I mean, that's an odd thing, right? I'm not saying odd meaning bad. It's just unusual.
It's hypocritical of me to have done that. I mean, but I felt like I was overwhelmed by this idea that I had to be somebody in a right, honorable way, and society was still telling me that was a way, and I think I put myself over my ideals.
Was this before 9/11?
Yes.
Wow. So that's also hard to explain, right? I know a lot.
97, 96.
Yeah, there's a whole generation of guys roughly your age who enlisted right after.
I just watched Iraq War.
9/11. Okay, the first Iraq War, but no one got very up in arms, so to speak, about that, right?
Well,
it wasn't a cultural thing.
I was undisciplined. Okay, I knew I needed that.
Hang on a second. I'm just going to put this out there. So there's a whole generation of guys. I'm kind of really starting to understand this. In fact, I had another guest on this show a few weeks ago who was one of that generation, who, saw 9/11, was basically apolitical and enlisted, and then later became an anti-war activist. But I just know there's a whole bunch of guys your age, roughly, who, 9/11 was really the turning point in their lives, and they ended up in the military. And many of them, at least the ones I know, have very different feelings about it now, right?
That's such an opposite reaction to 9/11, but okay.
Well, okay, but anyway, yeah. So I mean, it's a good thing that at least I know of a lot of them, not all, but a lot of them changed their minds about the whole thing, having gone through it. But so you're saying you were hypocritical because what's the line in Rage Against the Machine? The great line about like, I won't do what you tell me.
Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me.
Yeah, fuck you. That's the great line. Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. I mean, that right there. If Rage Against the Machine said nothing else, I'd be the biggest Rage Against the Machine fan.
We were talking about one coming up here that
Yeah.
we were responding to, that how corporate media and the message of what you're allowed to think is rebellion is completely wrong. And what Rage Against the Machine said at that time, there's a lyric in there, and it says, the billboard says, come and play, forget about the movement. And we see that right now really in front of our face a lot when you're deep in the movement.
All right. So I'm still
moving on,
trying to understand, or maybe there is no way to understand this, right? When you're 17, my son is 15. My God. Friday night, I'm talking about just this last Friday night, I was the worst person in the world. He hated me. He's always hated me. I suck. I don't work. I think I work, but I don't work hard. I'm a terrible parent. I'm a terrible dad. Everything's fucked, and he wants to go away and fuck school and fuck everything. And his mother too, by the way. Same things about his mother. Today and yesterday, it's all good. Let's go hang out, Dad. Sure, I'll do that thing you wanted to do. No problem. They're just little schizophrenics, basically, all the teenagers, I think. So I don't know if there is any way to understand your thinking, but it is interesting. I mean, you may be unique.
I wanted to go to college. I needed discipline, and that's what everybody told me. Like, that's the path. The GI Bill is intended because you keep those classes so low that you dangle this carrot in front of them that if you come kill for us blindly, then here's your carrot and your entrance into the world, which policing has always been as well.
Sure.
So, like, that's what I was myopic in pursuing where I wanted to achieve things without having to succumb to that other side of the fence, I think.
And you said you were undisciplined as a child.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get good grades in high school. Was probably pretty much just a pothead. And
what was your high school GPA?
Oh, maybe 2.5.
2.4, brother. There we go. Pound it out.
So, I mean, I have no, like, it wasn't even something I registered or cared about. To me, it was, what do I need to pass? A 61? Well, guess who's getting a 61? So it was just a step at that time.
But you were a thinker, right?
Sure. And I was kind of, I think in that system, I didn't even buy into their system at that time.
And you knew about Leonard Peltier, and you were listening to Rage Against the Machine, outright communists, right? They are, like, celebrating Che and whatever. And I still am like, did you think that the Marines were involved in this thing called imperialism or something? I mean, was there any reconciling of this, or is it just, I'm undisciplined and I'll get a free college education by doing this thing?
As we discuss this, I'm Rage Against the Machine and the lyrics do make you say, like, fuck this. I'm going to fight. And so maybe I just went to where I could fight, and I didn't know where to funnel that.
That's interesting. Yeah. Because, they're militant. Rage Against the Machine. Capital C communists have been militant. That's how they've taken over, right? Whether you like that or not, that's they first to tell you that's what those are. Those are armed revolutionary movements.
Yeah, sure, which we have to hit on later. I mean, when it comes to kill cops, I mean, I felt that way too. It wasn't with Mike Brown. It was with Tamir Rice.
Oh, really? Okay. After you were a cop, you felt like we should kill some cops.
Yeah.
Man, if you've had any negative experience with cops, and even me as my straight white middle class professor self, I have. In fact, I have to tell you, when I first met you just now, I have to tell you this: you look a lot like the cop who handcuffed me last time. And I still hate that guy. That was like 7 years ago. Handcuffed me in my front yard for something I kicked a cardboard box in the backyard of my house, and a neighbor called it in as domestic violence. That's all I did. And 4 cops show up. I end up getting handcuffed by this guy. He was the only white guy in the squad that was sent, and so I had another reason to do violence against cops. I still want to punch that guy. Anyway, I'm sure you don't think like he does. Wow. So Rage Against the Machine and their call to revolutionary violence may have actually, in some ways, indirectly inspired you to join up to become an athlete of death with the U.S. military. Right?
Yeah,
and
I didn't take a football
that.
scholarship because I felt I was too small, too.
So you're playing football, too.
Yeah,
There's
so
violence.
Villanova, could have gone there.
Oh, really?
I don't think I would have done good at school.
You got a
football
scholarship to Villanova?
Yeah, so I figured I'd be...
That's Division I, right?
No, I think it's 2.
Oh, still pretty good.
What it is, it's not. It's a weak
did you play?
division. It's outside linebacker. So I was too small on a college level. I thought I wasn't going to get bigger.
You must have been really fast and hit hard.
Well, I tried. I had a little...
You definitely are undersized for a linebacker.
Yeah. It's just fine. It's just tenacity. It's not about anything else.
I'm sure there's more than that.
Yeah. If you don't care that you get knocked out when you slam into the guy, they're going to...
You must be a very good athlete.
They're going to back down every time.
You must be a very good athlete.
So I figured that actually being smaller is a hell of an advantage in the military. Being 6'1" and 6'2" and 230
target.
pounds, not good for the military. I mean, not even even then when you're big, like we want to make you carry all the equipment, it's just not good to be big in the military. There's nothing to hide behind. Nothing's designed for you. So you're better off being small and not needing as much food and stuff anyway. So it's kind of an athlete honed for. But
that. I mean, did you? Okay, sorry, I keep coming back to this. But were you patriotic at all?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think I did believe that America was at least special. I knew that the horrors upon Native Americans. I knew, we turned the freaking Jews away when we needed to save them. I knew these things and we had these evils, but I thought we were ultimately good.
So you saw those as like mistakes
in
an otherwise virtuous narrative, something like that. Yeah. Okay. But were you like reading books then? Were you sort of a budding intellectual at that point?
Okay, so I'm such a nerd. So I mean, my appearance betrays my actual hobbies and what I would do.
What do you mean by your appearance?
So I mean, I was tattoos and the shortcut hair. Being good looking. Like,
you look like that cop who handcuffed me.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I was a computer programmer. I did bulletin boards with the nerds in school. So I hung out with the nerds. I hung out with the jocks. I hung out with the potheads. So I was a kid that would rather sit there and read the entire encyclopedia I had in my basement and read it. So yeah, I mean, I read.
In the service, I would imagine, right? You had a lot of downtime.
By the time I was in the Marine Corps, what happened is there's these things called the Army Institute of Professional Development and the Marine Corps Institute. So like one of my first, they're correspondence courses and online courses. So my first obsession with education became in completing every last one of those. And so I did like 400
when you were in the Corps.
Correspondence courses, because we didn't have online college then. So I would have completed my degree for sure. And I didn't have that option, so I had to do like 500 lower level college courses. So I probably have like 400 credits in lower level college.
Oh, really? The Corps is good for something, I guess.
Yeah.
So basic training, Marine Corps basic training, legendary, infamous, whatever you want to say about it. Like, what was that like? What was the first day like?
I loved it.
What was the first day like?
I loved it.
What happened?
I mean, there was a moment in the airplane where I was like, what are you doing? But once you got there, you get yelled at, and they come on the bus.
Where were you?
At Parris Island. Everybody from the East Coast goes to Parris Island, east or west of the Mississippi. So anyway, being in Parris Island, you get off the bus, and they yell at you, and you get on those yellow footsteps, like they say, and then they go, cut all your hair off, and I don't know, like it felt more like two-a-days in football than anything else. It was kind of fun. I enjoyed it.
You enjoyed it?
Oh yeah.
Well, because
I know a lot of people that enjoyed it.
I'm sure you were in like great shape, right? And all that.
I was down to like 145 by the time I got out of there. Yeah. So I went in probably 170.
I would imagine if you're in really good physical shape and athletic, it's probably not so bad. And I understand it being fun, but for anyone else, like, it would be hell on earth, if you're not in shape.
I mean, I would think at least 50% of the people thought it was fun, and then the other 50% were the ones that were out of shape and thought it was absolutely miserable.
Are there a lot of jocks in the Corps? There must be, right?
Yeah, I would think you have a clustering of it. Yeah. I have a real limited perspective in the military because I went straight into a FAST team.
What's that?
So it's a Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team. They're like a SWAT.
Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team.
So
you're an anti-terrorist SWAT team.
It's more like force protection and recapturing of something. So if you had to rescue an embassy or solidify an embassy, you would do that. Or if you needed to clean up something, it's like an emergency response team.
Damn.
So in that environment, you had to go through self-selection of infantry. So you had people that were already in infantry, and then you had to have the self-selection of that process. Then who made it through CQB school?
What's that? What's CQB?
Close quarters combat, close quarters battle. So by time you get...
Is that just hand to hand, or is that also
No,
weapons?
no, it's
Knives?
weapons, room to room.
And guns?
Just guns. So
Just guns?
Yeah, it's
close quarter gun.
clearing, room clearing, urban combat.
Gotcha. Wow.
So like when you're in that environment, you've really selected yourself already into an isolated group from the Marine Corps. And we were only 45-man team. We would go in other countries, hang out with the Air Force and the Navy because they transported us. So I was super isolated. My military experience isn't very valid.
You said you were self-selected. You chose to do this stuff
Yes.
within the Corps.
Yeah.
The really hardcore, Yeah,
everything is volunteer.
Athlete of death stuff.
Sure. I mean, I didn't choose to do force recon because I had no desire to do that.
Why?
It was fun.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
did you
if you join the Marine Corps, why would you join the Marine Corps if it wasn't for the possibility of getting in the shit?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, exactly. That's why I've had.
So what are the most odds of getting in the shit?
Yeah.
Okay.
But like you were you clear about this? Like you wanted to kill people?
I don't think I made a psychological line that I would be killing either someone innocent or maybe even killing, because we could kind of separate ourselves, I guess, if you try to. And I always did try to separate myself emotionally from what I did. Did
you have, like the post 9/11 guys, right? That generation I was just talking about, they had a really clear idea about who they were going to be killing, really specific idea. Did you have a specific idea then about who you're going to be killing?
No, I didn't care.
It wasn't Arabs, wasn't terrorists.
I was very myopic at that time.
It was just there are bad people in the world who need to be killed, and I'm good at that, or I could be good at that, so I should do that. Was that it?
I kind of question whether I even processed it that far to care whether they were good or evil. It was just what I was signed up to do.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm just really curious.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know. Yeah. I mean, it's a weird thing
really
to try and explore. Even the memory now sometimes feels like somebody else did those things. And like I put up that wall to try and, even in policing especially, where I tried to like transform myself. Like when you don't see my past, like people in my neighborhood wouldn't have known I was a cop. It was totally like a transformation process. People didn't see me in any other light. There's not pictures of me in uniform out there. I tried to be RoboCop.
Let me ask you this. Did you have issues with anger?
No, I mean...
As a kid?
That's a weird thing to say. Like, I don't know what even issues would be, because I never lashed out.
It's kind of a silly question.
I've never crossed the line.
Like everyone has issues with anger.
Of
but
course,
I mean, did you have... I mean, so my anger has always been... For me, it's been an issue because it has... gotten out of control at times in ways that have been destructive to me, self-destructive, right? Or to people who I care about, right? Or relationships. Did you have any of that?
No, I'm ultimately disciplined.
No, then. I mean, when you're 16, 17.
No, I will not lash out unless provoked.
Oh, okay. You said you were undisciplined though as a kid.
Undisciplined in my responsibility. So like if I had to clean the house, I wouldn't have done it. If I had to do homework, I would have done it.
I'll bet you playing a lot of tackle football helped.
Yeah, I mean, seriously? I got it out, sure. So I had no desire. I could have taken it out the next day. I mean, that's a very valid point, sure. Mm-hmm. I had nothing to wait for. I played lacrosse during the off season, so there's nothing to wait for.
Mm-hmm. I think contact sports are great. I love them.
Well, at least for us stupid alpha males that can't process things.
Like I didn't, of course, I'm such an idiot. I didn't take up, I do boxing and martial arts, and I didn't take that up until I was 41. So by then all the damage had been done. Like I had broken all kinds of stuff all over this country and fucked up all sorts of relationships, et cetera. And then it did really help me. But man, I wish I had done it when I was like 14 or 10.
Yeah, and maybe I thought military and policing were like good pathways to funnel that.
So I was going to say this when you said you were undisciplined, and that was maybe one of the reasons you went into the Corps. I'm as anti-military as anybody. I'm just as anti-war, anti-military as anybody. I hate that whole culture deeply. But I will say I've known many people who had very difficult childhoods, who were kind of from homes like yours and mine that were so-called broken, divorce, chaos, no structure. And the military actually saved them, and just the discipline that's imposed on you.
Structure's
You're
nice.
forced to do it. Yeah, kind of. And in a way, like that's been the arc of my whole life, is like trying to build that structure on my own that I always wanted and never had. And I do. That's why I'm always curious about like basic training stories, what it's like, because I have to say I'm a little envious. I'm a little envious
of the adventure of it.
No, the structure of like having someone tell you what to do every minute of every day.
I don't know.
It's such a this,
I know
this
it's
is
a
my
farce,
this is
though.
my contradiction, right? Because I'm Mr.
But it's a farce.
I'm Mr. Freedom and Mr. Anti-state and Mr. Anti-military and all that stuff. And do what you want, renegade history, and it's all about the drunks and the whores and the criminals and stuff, which is all true. I completely stand by that. Everyone who's listening, but this is my secret in a way. My dirty secret is that I simultaneously envy football players and not cops, but military servicemen, et cetera. And then athletes. Like it's just that thing about being on a team, having a coach who yells at you.
But it's an
I actually love
illusion,
that.
dude. It's an illusion. It's not real.
What do you mean?
Like,
It's not? Of course, it's real. It's real when you're in the Marine Corps.
So, like, I think a transformative thing in the policing was when I had that power, and I realized all the rules were bullshit. I could do whatever I wanted to. All your signs that said you can't go here or you can't do that.
In the Marine Corps, you can do that?
in the real world, in America.
Yeah.
Okay. In policing, it was that way. And even in the Marine Corps, it's that way. Like, I only have to tell you what you want to hear at that moment. Like, it's a power dynamic. It's not an outcome-based dynamic. Like, they will tell you, do this and respect me. And if you tell them yes, sir, and you give them exactly what they want for that moment, they haven't really exercised their power.
Yeah, but you can't walk off the base whenever you want to.
You can't, but you can.
Well,
you just have to deal with the repercussions.
You'll go to prison.
Nobody goes to prison for at that point. You go to prison later.
Yeah, you go to prison.
Can't usually that you get out.
You go to prison.
So it's not like, but even then, it's like, well, still, I only have this thing to deal with. Like, I don't have to do any of these things. Anywhere you say I can't go is only a matter of my ingenuity to get to where you said I couldn't go. And I just don't believe in any of the rules. Like, it just feels like, no, this is all nonsense. Like, we can create our own new rules and think with our own new intelligence. What they told us we should be doing is shit.
You were thinking this at the time?
Yeah, because I started testing this thing. So where it started is when you have a uniform on, a police uniform, you can go wherever you want and people don't say anything. You're talking about
when you were a cop?
Yeah. And you can go anywhere and people don't say anything.
Yeah, no,
and
we know.
It was like, well, why? Like, I'm going in the places I have no reason at all to be in. So I started testing it. Like, just going into places like hospitals or factories or somewhere, it says like, do not enter and you can't go in. So I just started walking in and walking around and nobody would ever say shit. So then when I became a detective, I would walk around in cut off sleeves with shorts on, and you didn't have any idea I was a cop. And I would continue to go into those buildings and things because I knew I had an out. So I would test all these boundaries and never be challenged. And it was like, if you just fucking play the game and pretend, they'll all go along like sheep. So
this comes back to your thing that you DM'd me the other day, which was that you said you were a postmodernist, and I was like, what? How is that? And you said, yeah, that whole thing about social construction. I agree with that. That's how I operate, and that's I guess what you're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Is that these are all social constructions, but they have great power in the world, right?
Right.
Yeah, they're inventions. We agree.
Right,
Totally.
so I have to live by them.
But they have a lot of power. They shape the way that people live.
But so that's what I'm saying about the truth. So the truth is so that you can be completely right about truth being a matter of perspectives and what it is, and it doesn't fucking matter if we're living in a world of social constructs. Like, if it's a brain in the vat and the brain's in the vat and we're here, I don't give a fuck. If these are the rules to the Matrix, well, then these are the rules that I have to operate in.
I mean, if you choose to play in the Matrix, right?
Yeah, and we don't have a pathway out, so play in the goddamn Matrix for crying out loud.
No, you could move to another country, for instance, right?
Well, then again, so I'm not going to get into. I think that's going to die too. I think that's all. It's inevitable that borders and nations.
The nation state's going to die.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, gosh, I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, even right now, global entities are moving into more powerful than nation entities. Exxon's way more powerful than the vast majority of countries.
I'll tell you this: it just took me 6 weeks to get my son a passport. because of the bureaucracy that they've imposed since 9/11. And so I don't know. It literally felt like the federal government was keeping him imprisoned in this country for a while there. Like it was almost impossible to get a passport.
Yeah, but you're not going to keep people like me out of power for long.
Sure. Oh, really?
So
wait. Oh,
I mean, I'm only the tip. Like what's coming behind me is way bigger. And you're not going to be able to stop these millennials. Eventually they're going to be in charge of shit and they're not going to play these games.
Yeah. I mean, certainly technology and, the digital revolution and information flow and the ability to travel. Poor people can take flights now. They couldn't do that until recently. Yeah, all of that, I agree with you, is basically, I don't know if it's dissolving, but it's subverting borders, which, a lot of people have written about this. We are not breaking news here. But okay, so you were in the Marine Corps for how long?
4 years.
I
went in 97. So I got out in August of September.
Seriously?
I got out in August of 2011.
Oh my God, wow. How'd you feel about that then?
So I felt like I did my time. So when I was sitting there on September 11th, I was very myopic, just thinking, I gave you my 4 years. And now you're going to come back.
So you didn't want to re-enlist.
You don't have a choice. It's in active reserves.
Oh, okay.
So all they had to do was tell me I had to go. And I had to go. There was no choice.
But you didn't want to go fight the bad guys?
No, I gave my 4 years. You had your chance.
Well, I'm just saying a lot of guys did.
What I felt like is you had 4 years to kill me.
Joe Rogan
didn't happen.
Yeah, Joe Rogan just told me that what's his name, Tim Kennedy wants to go back in to go kill ISIS. Right?
Yeah, and
some guys want that.
When I've talked to him, it seemed very.
You talked to him
when we exchanged on Twitter back and forth often, and he seemed perfectly reasonable. So how he reaches that conclusion is one that I won't be able to wrap my head around.
Which conclusion?
To go think that our military is doing any kind of work that's remotely good.
Oh yeah, okay.
So I mean, it is the army of oppression globally.
Well, if nothing else, it hasn't done a very good job of reducing terrorism by killing terrorists. That strategy seems to not have worked.
Punishment as a deterrent is completely ineffective. I wonder if we already know this.
It's really remarkable. I mean, so I assume I always say to these people, well, I guess if you nuked the entire region, maybe for a while there wouldn't be any terrorists coming out of it. If there were no human beings left on the entire subcontinent, sure.
Yeah, but you just created terrorists in every other country the moment you did that.
Probably. I mean, then what would the rest of the world think about Americans then? Yeah, no, it's amazing how they don't address that sort of basic contradiction in their thinking. All right, so you were out. You were happy to be out. Were you ever deployed?
We were forward deployed, so emergency response unit. So you're always they space those units out around the globe so that you can respond to anything within that 24-hour period.
So where were you?
So I was in Yokosuka, Japan. That was the main place I was out of. So we had whatever that would be, the South, Asia corridor.
If shit went down in Southeast Asia, you would have saved the people. Yeah.
Right.
But you never had to do that.
No.
Okay, so you never pulled the trigger?
No. Yeah. Never pulled the trigger in the police department either.
Right. Oh, that's funny. You've never pulled the trigger professionally?
No.
Huh. All those years, all that training.
I had at least...
all that expertise.
At least 100 opportunities.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. Well, of course. Every minute you have the opportunity to kill somebody.
But even justifiably.
Yeah. I can see that. All right, so you're out. It's 2001. Then you decide, all right, I've done the Marines. Now I'm going to be a cop.
But that was always the plan.
Oh, it was always the plan.
Right. So I was like, you have to be 21 to be a cop.
Like even when you were a kid, you wanted to be a cop?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So you have to be 21 to be a cop. So I had 4 years to kill anyway.
Okay.
So then I just went straight into policing. And while I was waiting to process policing, I drove one of those armored trucks around.
So you wanted to be a cop before you wanted to be a Marine?
As a kid, I wanted to be a cop. Yeah. I mean, I remember watching Cops and always wanting to be a cop.
What? Yeah. Where'd that come from?
I mean, I want to be benevolent and be like, oh, it's because I wanted to help people. But I probably just wanted to do the damn car chase.
Michael, you wanted to help people.
I just wanted to do the car chase. I want to say I wanted to help people, but I wanted to help people by being the one who did the car chase for them.
Yeah. You wanted to do what your dad didn't want to do.
I guess. Yeah. I mean, I wanted to stand on the wall. So I always wanted to stand on the wall. And I think you need people like me in this world. It's just be careful what you do with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's that helping instinct that I was trying to get at earlier when I was asking about your dad and his family, which I think is very important. And you actually have a very interesting, pretty developed critique of that very thing, which we'll get into in a second, right? So you went straight into the Baltimore PD?
Yeah, just the processing time work to do.
When you were 21.
Right.
And you became a cop right away.
I think I was 22. It took 23. It took a while. It takes a while to process.
What's it called? You had to go through the police academy, right?
Yeah, and then you have to, but cake. It takes a long time to just process, just the
bureaucratic stuff. Right? But the academy must have been cake after the Marines, right?
It was a joke.
Yeah. Oh, that's kind of your big thing, is that there's shitty training going on.
I mean, it's certainly an aspect of it. Yeah. At this point, I'm not sure whether we need more training or not, because I don't think we're sending them to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. So why would we be training them to do the wrong thing? That doesn't make any sense.
And on that, I really agree with you.
So, yeah, I mean, it was a joke. I mean, firearms training was a joke. So I shot, unbelievably, coincidentally, I'm tied with a dude in my academy class who was also a Marine, but we shot the highest scores ever in the police academy. We were average shooters.
Really?
Average.
Really?
Yeah, I was average in the Marine Corps. Like the guys I was with, I was no superstar with a weapon. But in policing, it was like I was a god. Yeah, and it's like, come on, man. Come on. I can't be this much better than everybody. That's ridiculous.
What were you thinking about policing generally at that moment when you were in the academy? I mean, what were you thinking?
How the fuck are these people in here with me going to be able to do this?
But you thought that policing, generally speaking, was a benevolent
activity, if you follow the rules as you were supposed to follow the rules. I mean, I was well aware that most of these people were idiots. They weren't going to do proper investigations. They were going to be...
So you believed at that point that if there was better training and if they recruited better people, policing would be a good thing.
Long held
a very
that.
Good thing.
I held that probably until a defining moment in 2009, 2010.
Oh, all right. There was a defining moment. Okay, so you went into the force, and then where were you first? Where did you work in Baltimore?
Okay, so after the academy and doing all the things you did, the first thing you do is go on foot patrol, and they had started this foot patrol thing. So my very first assignment was right there where Freddie Gray was killed in those.
What's the neighborhood?
I don't know why I can't remember the name.
It's West Baltimore, though.
Yeah, it's West Baltimore. It's a particular court. It's near Mountain Fulton, but it doesn't matter.
It's all right. West Baltimore.
I can't remember. It's bothering me that I can't remember the damn name of that building. So that's, you just like walking projects, like 3 or 4 stories high, kind of like basketball courts in the middle, and you have like apartment complexes around it.
Public housing.
Sure. Yep. Yeah, definitely. And so you walk on foot around there, and they just drop you there. So it's like 2 rookies. I hung out with another Marine, and we self-selected ourselves again. So I keep putting myself into these things that blinded me to policing.
Did you want that? Did you want to do foot patrol in a neighborhood like that?
We didn't have a choice. So I guess I was a real cop. So yeah, you know, like that was my first time having a gun and badge on the street.
Was your partner white?
No, he's black.
Was he from Baltimore?
From Baltimore. Okay. So, I mean, that's one reason why I probably self-selected that, just because he had information that I just didn't have. And we would then break into, because we had no assignments, right? So it was just like, well, what are you measured by? You're measured by arrest. So whether you did anything or not.
Did you have quotas?
Well, you don't ever have quotas. You just have expectations, and then expectations.
So implicit quotas.
Sure, because expectations become benchmarks, and then benchmarks become evaluations, and those evaluations become quotas.
And you knew this going in?
Of course.
When you started. Okay.
Sure.
And everyone does? Is that what
and I think I get stuck on this, whether they actually know and are refusing to process it, or if they are truly ignorant.
How is it communicated to you?
That good officers are the ones that get the arrest. So it's just a metric. So even if it's subconscious, you know, like I try to tell people, like, if your boss tells you to not walk out of the door, but every time you walk out of the door, your boss gives you $100, well, you're going to just keep walking out the door.
Would they report internally the number of arrests as sort of victories?
It's the biggest issue there is. So at the end, they will even have times where they call commanders, will be calling the like sector commanders and supervisors to know stats hourly. So how many arrests have your people made within the last hour?
Right.
They'll get down to.
Right. So it becomes
it's
like,
everything.
It's like sports then, right? It's the statistics in a sport.
Absolutely.
Athletes of death.
Sure. So I did that for 11 years.
Athletes of incarceration.
No, it's true. Yeah, sure.
I know.
Right.
I wasn't entirely joking. In fact, I wasn't joking at all. Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me.
So we would, to get arrest, the only thing you could really arrest anybody for was drug dealing.
Uh-huh. Not the only thing.
Yeah. I mean, what are you going to, you're walking on foot. So what are you going to do?
Yeah, no, okay.
I mean, you tell me. I couldn't come up with anything else.
Well, no, so you're what you just said completely confirms my biggest argument about all of this stuff. So I'm happy to hear it, but I don't want to be facile about it either. So, I mean, it really, like, those are the only crimes you saw?
Yeah. I mean, you're two cops walking around.
Really?
Yeah, that's all there is.
Huh.
So,
and you're talking about actual
But you don't see that when you're walking around. You have to go hide and wait for it.
Yeah, and you're talking about actual dealing. We're not talking about, like, violence committed by drug-running gangs. We're talking about actual dealing, like hand-to-hand.
Yeah.
That's all you saw that was criminal.
Yeah.
Huh.
So
that confirms my argument even more.
And so remember what that is that is me going out to arrest the 16 to 24-year-old black males who can't get a different job.
Yep.
Right. So they're actually at work. And that's who I'm going for. And we would break into the public housing buildings because they keep the heat on and things stay powered. So we would break into those vacant houses, the apartments that were vacant, and then you just sit and watch out the windows waiting for people to drug deal.
How did you get access? Did you get a warrant to do that? Or you didn't need a warrant? You're saying it was that corrupt that you just would break into an apartment?
Rules? Okay, so anyway.
Well, at least technically there are, yeah.
It's the city of Baltimore's property, so yeah, whatever. I'll articulate.
So wait, hold on. That's actually really important. So, because I'm sure a lot of people don't know this, even probably a lot of people who live in those housing projects. Do you legally have access to?
I can't think of a reason I don't.
To those places, you can actually break in.
Okay, let me just put this out here, which I've said this 1,000 times before, but just so we have it solidified. There was never anything I could not do legally, and there's never been anyone I couldn't put in jail completely legally.
But you said you broke in, though.
Sure. I broke the plane. That's what breaking means.
Okay.
So breaking, entering.
But you could have gotten a key, is what you're saying.
I don't know. I don't think they would have let me.
But then it's not legal, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, it probably was against housing department's policy.
Okay.
So whether that's illegal or not, it would be different. And I could always just justify it. I could say I heard somebody in there.
So police department policy didn't bar you from doing that.
Nothing ever barred.
Yeah.
Maybe in fact, police department policy did. I don't know.
Were you directed to do that?
No.
Okay.
But I was directed to get the arrest, so they don't care how you get the arrest as long as you get the arrest.
Okay, so you go into this apartment in a public housing complex with your partner, and you would look out the window. You would watch people.
Well, sometimes we would separate then, so he would go hide somewhere else. That way he could catch them while I just called it.
And you would wait for a deal to go down, and then you would go scoop up the bad guy.
Well, then I probably was a little jumpy and would just get the dealer. But as time goes on and you get better, you pick off a few buyers first. And then not only does that give you like 10 arrests because you get 9 buyers, and then you finally arrest a dealer. So that's like 10. So you do that, and that builds a better case as well.
Right. So and this is in the 2000s, right?
Yeah. So
what was the main drug then?
Well, I'm from Baltimore, so it's heroin. It's always been heroin. Always will be heroin.
There wasn't a crack thing in
it's not,
Baltimore?
I mean, it's there, but it's not.
Even in the 80s?
Heroin. Meth's not there. Nobody gives a shit about anything in Baltimore except for heroin. There's crack. There's Suboxone.
And who were the buyers generally?
Poor white people.
Yeah. Coming in from out of the city, outside the city.
Vast majority.
Like from your old hometown.
So it's like guns.
Like from Abingdon.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
We would lock people up from West Virginia. There was this group there called Smackdown that was really, it's the only drug group I've ever been, like street drug group I admired. Like, I was like, God damn, you guys are good. And what they did, I would arrest buyers from West Virginia, like construction like workers come in a construction looking van from West Virginia to go and buy 100 pills of heroin from street dealer and then take that back to West Virginia and flip it.
Wait, what is Smackdown? What did they do?
That was their name of their gang, yeah.
It was a gang that
So they called their drug Smackdown. Then
but they were sounds like they were traders, that they would buy the drugs and then sell them?
Well, yeah, that's what drug dealing is.
But it's like the
it's a middleman.
It's like the
retailing
or something. Yeah, it's another branch of the retailing trade, right?
Oh yeah.
Or
of
they're
course.
whatever they are. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
like
traders.
door-to-door salesmen from somewhere else. Yeah, they're just
they would
coming
buy-
in the warehouse to pick up their supplies.
They would buy from low-level street dealers and then resell for a
they
higher
don't
price.
know how to get drugs from other people. That's one reason why it's so easy to get street drug dealers in Baltimore. I mean, remember, there's as many drug dealers, probably more, in West Virginia than there was in Baltimore. The system, the way it's structured, is that you can only catch the dealer that doesn't have resources. Because they don't have, because they're poor is why they're the drug dealers that also get arrested. They work for way less than minimum wage.
They're out in the open air, for one thing, right? In front of
because they don't
everybody.
have the resources of a car or a house
they're poor.
or a book bag. Right.
At least the kids who are actually doing the selling.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the street lieutenant. That's fine.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds like a great system to be a part of. I mean, man, when it comes down to putting people in cages for selling things that make people feel good, I can't really be academic anymore. I get, this is when I want to kill cops. So you must have had second thoughts about what you were doing? I mean,
I knew the drug war didn't work.
Why were you doing it?
It was my job.
But why didn't you quit?
That's why humans are incentivized to behave. I have a pension. I have they're paying for my college. So I didn't do my master's until I was out. So I did my bachelor's while I was in. So I had that money coming in that they did tuition reimbursement for a good part of it.
Did you ever think you were doing good work as a cop?
I'm pretty sure there were moments. So I was a good detective when I did a case good. So if I had a preliminary investigation for a rape.
Oh, so you did do violent crime.
As patrol officer. Yeah.
Later. Oh.
Yeah. Just not as a detective.
Okay. But later on.
After walking foot.
You did violent.
Right. So there were times, I think, like while walking foot, did I do any good? Hell no.
Really? Because of course that's what everybody's calling for now. Is like, we need more foot patrols. That's
doesn't
the
make any
problem.
sense.
These cops are in their cars and they don't have contact with the community. I'm like, wait a minute. I'd rather they not have contact with me.
Just for the record, the goal is to not have state-sanctioned guns interact with the community. That's actually the goal. So we don't want cops in your neighborhood. That doesn't make any sense. When the gun is there, it's empirically more dangerous for everybody. So you're accepting the idea that you want to be in a more dangerous situation because of your unsubstantiated fear.
You mean when the cop's gun is in the neighborhood?
Any gun.
Yeah, but you're saying in this case, when the cop's gun is in the
The
neighborhood,
cop's not exceptional to any gun.
people are more likely to get killed.
Vastly.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Yeah.
I would scold people on that when I was in. So like if I went in there and they were calling me for domestic violence, I would just kind of yell at them and tell them how un-American it was that you just called the state to send a fucking 25-year-old child to your house to tell you how you should behave. That's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Like the guy who handcuffed me, who looks like you. Yeah, that's what he was doing. So then you became a detective later, or
We become a patrol officer first, and we get the car, and then I got to do some good stuff and became a good cop for the main reason I had a really good supervisor at that time who was one of those people who focused on professionalism. So he would make me do all the hard cases. Like most cops will spend their lives actually like trying to not do the hard things. And he would make me do the hard things, whether I wanted to do them or whether they were anywhere near my responsibility or not.
So the donuts thing is true.
Some of them, yeah, totally. I mean, I would have to yell at cops for that too. Like, come on, man, don't need a donut uniform. What are you doing?
Oh, you wanted them to work harder as cops.
Of course. Yeah, I thought we were unprofessional.
Okay. I know, but you hated your profession. You thought it was mostly bad what you were doing professionally. You're full of contradictions, Michael. I'm trying to tease these out.
Maybe if it was more professional,
okay,
then I wouldn't have those issues. And I didn't hit that point until I was a supervisor.
Okay. You certainly don't think that now, though, right? You don't think the problem is professionalism?
Oh, of course not.
Yeah,
no,
okay.
It's a flawed concept to begin with.
Right.
If making it more professional only makes it more palatable.
You know what it does? It militarizes it.
Sure.
And that's exactly
what's
been happening.
militarized.
That's exactly what's been happening.
And we've seen it going on as time goes on. So after being a patrol officer, you handle those normal 911 calls. But I wanted to be cool, like all the other cops that got to do the fun stuff, the raids, right? So I trained to do these raids.
Fun stuff, the raids. You liked breaking down doors and barging in with
of
guns.
Course. I did that. I mean, I spent 17 to 21.
Scaring the shit out of people.
Of course.
Yeah. It's too bad you didn't hang around in the military for the Afghanistan night raids. You could have been dropping out of helicopters and doing that in the middle of the night with some poor villagers in Afghanistan.
And would have been just as evil.
No, I know. I know you think that. Yeah. I was making fun of the guys. Actually, it was Michael Flynn, who was the guy who did the intelligence for those operations, the night raids. Anyway, digression. So you got the car, patrol, and then you became a detective.
Right. After doing patrol for a while.
That was your choosing, right? Or at least you wanted to do that.
Yeah, I wanted to do that. I kind of went in benevolently, and I said I wanted to do IID. So I went to do internal affairs first.
Oh.
And
okay.
so
now you're sounding like Michael A. Wood.
I got rejected from internal affairs.
Okay.
Because I was too controversial.
Already you were controversial. Why?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess people pick up that I'm a little arrogant and confident in the way I do things, and that rubs a lot of cops the wrong way. So when I saw unprofessional, inadequate cops, I wouldn't hesitate to point out their inadequacies and their embarrassment of me as a professional.
Oh, you were calling them out.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That'll
so I have reputations and made enemies doing that.
Yeah.
And so I didn't get to go IID. So one of my old supervisors called and said we could do the Violent Crime Impact Division, which was a narcotics detective. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll take that. It's better than being in patrol, which I thought, which was wrong.
By the way, what does your dad think about this when you're a cop, when you're in the Marines? What was your relationship like then?
I feel like that side was proud of that. They enjoyed that. I think they like to take a lot of credit for things that I have achieved that they've had no part in, which is kind of typical of the MO of capitalism.
That's your theme about them.
Yeah. That was kind of the extent of that. I think they were proud of it.
Yeah, I bet they had the official portraits, right, in uniform of you.
Of course.
Prominently displayed.
Yeah. Probably the only pictures of me that I ever.
Yeah, I bet. How about your mom?
I think she's always been proud that I've tried, and fought to at least try to do the right thing. It took me a long time to get some kind of clarity on what that is.
What do you mean?
I thought policing was right, so I've always tried to be a good human, at least to some extent. It's just I probably funneled that in the wrong ways for a lot of times.
Were they concerned about your specific choice of police department and neighborhoods that you worked?
Yeah, but I don't think that would surprise anybody.
What about you?
Of course, that's where I went. I was going to go to Baltimore. I was going to go to East and West Baltimore. There was no. Why? You should have known that when I was a child.
Why? Why were you going there?
That's where everything happens.
So
whether it was a car chase or it was the most help, no matter what perspective, that would be the location.
That's where the bad guys are.
Sure, and I think those kind of benevolent ideas are what lead us sometimes down these paths, because somebody can be wanting to do a good thing like that, and then they just haven't really thought through how that system would operate with human beings involved.
So the word that's coming to mind is savior. Did you have a savior complex? Is that what this is?
Maybe. That's certainly been ripped out of me by my friends in the movement, because if you're at all a white savior, you're going to get your ass checked pretty darn fast.
Well, I mean, isn't there a lot of the left? I mean, isn't all of it actually kind of motivated by not maybe white saviorhood, but
liberals?
Savior.
The white liberal is why that's our enemy, and we talk about that.
Aren't you interested in saving people?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, all right. We'll get back to that.
Okay.
So,
you got down a path there.
Here's what I think you're pissed off at your dad about. He was not a savior. He had none of that. He was like Trump, right? In that way?
Sure.
I think that's what actually drives people crazy. One of the things that drives people crazy about Trump is that he has none of that. Like, he doesn't give a fuck, clearly, about other people in that way. He doesn't want to go out into the world and save the poor, benighted third worlders. And he doesn't want to go out and, he kind of does want to save the inner cities. He's said that at least. But, he doesn't. We don't believe him, I guess, is what it is, right? And that's what pisses people off. Like, they want him to be the white savior. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah,
about Trump?
Mm-hmm.
Just about Trump. So I'm just guessing, sounds kind of like your anger at your father about that and his family is sort of similar?
I have no idea.
Yeah. All right. No, it sounded similar to me. I don't know. But
I'm just a dumb ape that responds to its environment ultimately.
No, you're not. You're clearly not a dumb ape. That's why I'm talking to you. I don't talk to dumb apes. Yeah, no, and it just seems like, I mean, clearly you were just full of conflicts and, contradictions in a way about this stuff. Yeah, oh, sure. And that's what's so interesting about you. But yeah, but at least a party, and I've had this. I'm not speaking on high about this. I've had to fight my own savior complex my whole life. It seems like that was part of what was going on there, right? You wanted to go help people.
Yeah, and I certainly thought I could do it better.
And you thought you could help them. Yeah. That's the thing, right? You have to believe, first of all.
Or at least I could do it better than that jackass that you trusted to do it.
Yeah, but it starts with knowing a better way to live for them, right?
Yeah. I mean, I bought into that. I was told that. I would completely shed that concept now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You know that the way that they should be living.
Yeah,
right?
I guess I probably thought that at the time.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, that's to me, that's the root of the problem. But and
that was ugly to get out. That was an ugly process to remove myself from thinking.
No, it's hard. It's hard to deprogram ourselves from that. I mean, it's interesting. Like, where did it come from, though? Like, I know for me, it's obvious because I had socialist parents. Although even they kind of struggled against it. But, I was surrounded by people who had all kinds of savior complexes. But like, I don't see any source of it for you. Where'd you get that from?
I was a huge football fan.
Huh.
It's the ultimate socialist structure that there is.
White saviors come out of football?
It's the ultimate socialism structure.
Yeah, but you don't get white saviors coming out of that culture.
No, but I mean, even if I believed in that concept and I was evaluating the system of football. So what makes football great? What makes football great is that every team has a chance at the beginning of the year. And that's because all the assets possible get funneled down to the weakest team so that we have the most fun and the most productivity by getting us all to be able to fight.
But it's tribal. It's not a universalist thing.
No.
White saviorhood.
That's the outcome. So that's what the people are doing. But the actual structure of the NFL is socialism completely.
Well, teams are certainly socialist in that way, right? It's a cooperative effort. I mean,
the NFL is.
It has to be pure cooperation, in fact, or else you lose. I mean, you cannot, everybody literally has to be on the same page, right, with the playbook, or else it fails.
Right.
No, for sure. But
so if we're not on the playbook, I can completely see that.
But you're not. Not only do you not care about helping the other team, you want to destroy them, right?
No.
Yeah,
I just want to stop them from making the play. Wow. A good quarterback, you want to break his arm and then you want to help him back up and say, I'm sorry I broke your arm. But those are the rules of the game.
As I said, you want to destroy them. I mean,
for that moment of the play that they mutually agreed to this for.
20-0 is good. 80-0 is better. And if you get to 100-0, that's really great. You want to destroy them. You want to humiliate them.
If I did that.
Nah, come on. No. So that's not. I don't see any white saviors coming out of that culture at all.
I don't know. I mean, that's a tie-in. Yeah. I don't know.
Where'd you get it from? So how did you hear about? Sorry, I keep coming back to this, but like Rage Against the Machine. Who turned you on to them?
Okay, so I distinctly remember that moment too. Cool. It was like probably my earliest memory that I could completely solidify was. I mean, what did I listen to at that time? Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses.
That's to be expected, right?
Yeah. So. Yeah. I had a friend in 8th grade pull out a tape in his house, and he was like, dude, you got to listen to this. And it was the original Rage Against the Machine cassette. Yes, the cassette. And we put that in, and he played it. And that moment, I was like, what the fuck is this?
What was your friend's name?
I have no idea. I didn't care about that. No.
What do you mean you didn't care? You know his name. What's his name?
No, I don't know his name.
You don't have to give his last name.
No, I don't know his name.
All right.
I was in 8th grade.
He was an 8th grader.
I don't remember anything.
So you got turned on to left-wing politics by another 8th grader.
Yeah, it looks that way. Because I do see that as my defining left-wing side.
And by Zach, what's his face?
Zach De La Rocca.
Yeah, De La Rocca. Yeah. My friend of mine was what's the guitarist's name?
Tommy Morello?
Yeah, Morello. He was Morello's roommate at Harvard.
Which a lot of people forget too. It's like, hey, dude, this guy's got a business degree from Harvard, and you want to know why Rage Against the Machine doesn't have to do a lot of shows because he manages their money. They're good.
Well, I mean, left politics, libertarian politics, classical conservative politics. It's all intellectual. I mean, you have to be an intellectual, right, to have that way of thinking. I mean. So, yeah.
For right-wing thinking, you have to be an intellectual?
Well, I know certain kinds. No, I think there's the Trumpist cultural conservative, reactionary, whatever you want to call populism. No, of course you don't need anything. You just need tribalism. You need feelings for that. You need some sort of basic primitive ideas about who the bad guy is, right? But it's not, generally speaking, I think this is
because like the pushback I get with the liberal thing is like, go to college. So you went to college, you get your degrees, and then that's what turned you into a liberal. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I didn't get a lot of liberal ideology pushed on me in college and going through what I really feel like I got to liberal ideas because I just followed the evidence. Like I didn't. I don't care.
I assumed that, because this is true for everybody, including myself, like that somebody, and this goes for everybody of every political ideology. Okay, this is not just the left, but that somebody I got to you, like found you, or you found them and you got turned on by them, and then they sort of instructed you and kind of, not like in a Machiavellian way, just that's what happens. But with you, it truly is just sort of organic in a way, or?
Yeah, truly. I don't know anything.
It's that eighth grader.
I've tried, that eighth
and
grader.
Zach.
I really believe in the research methodology of just getting your biases and your prejudices out. So like one reason why I think criminal justice field, as a scholarly field, I don't think they know shit. I think everything they write is nonsense based off of a false premise that they're in a religion that they've all bought into because they followed this system and they didn't step back to say, is my prejudices and biases really out of this research that I've been doing? Because it's not.
I don't know criminal sociology that well. Like, what is sort of the consensus?
So they're pushing things right now. Like one of the leading things is evidence-based policing, right? So evidence-based policing is saying, well, you look at these stats, you look at geography, you look at predictive policing and what all this data and how it feeds this system. And that's fine. And we can have some arguments about that if we actually had good data going into the system. But everything that criminal justice is based upon, every single premise comes from those three things that I argue about constantly in America, that policing is unique because it was designed for and continues to do three things. That's the creation and maintenance of a slave class, and then the extraction of resources from that slave class to fund their own oppression. It is the protection of elite property and the continued genocide of Native American people.
Wow.
That is what policing does.
Okay.
So everything you are doing is taking the data from those three things and then saying you can make a conclusion. You cannot make conclusions off of that shit data. You have to start from scratch. Until we start from scratch, your field is junk.
All right. So, you just went down, or I don't know what you did. I mean, we just diverged sharply right there, you and me. I don't know. We can tease this out. I'm not sure exactly how to approach this at this point, but I do. Let's see. I just don't want it to be, a 5-hour debate.
Every conversation
on
is
this
a 5-hour debate.
Particular thing. I do want to get at the core of those ideas, though. I do. I don't want to ignore them. There's so much to talk about, right? I mean, I'm saying this is like a PhD you just laid out, worth of stuff. Well,
I'm glad you said that, because when people get me to ask me to explain that on Twitter, and I'm like, well, you're on grade 8. And I don't want to be arrogant, but I'm on grade 20 something. I can't, you have to get at least to the 20s before I can have this conversation.
All I know is that the things you just said in that 1 minute right there was, there are hundreds of books, right, written on those topics. So, all right, when you started talking about data-driven policing, and that you're saying that's sort of the consensus now among criminal
justice kind of stuff. That's
sociologists.
Where they lean towards,
yeah. I guess I believe you. I don't know. I don't know that field that well.
I only have a bachelor's in it, so I got out of it. Yeah, it's nonsense.
Doesn't matter. But here's the thing. When you said that, I immediately, because I just wrote about this actually, a very long piece, that the history of that idea is rooted in progressivism. So that was the early 20th century progressive movement. That's what they wanted policing to do too. That was the consensus among progressives then, because
wanted to do what?
To collect data on crime and criminals, so as to better police people, right? So at the time, police forces in the country, of course, were part of urban machines. This is when, the immigrant groups would have their organization that would basically control the city politics, like in Baltimore, New York, Philly, everywhere, Boston. And the cops were basically just sort of wings of those machines, and they would sort of actually perform social services, sort of like social welfare. Not so much policing as we think of it, not so much what's it called? Surveilling and apprehending criminals. But, giving Mrs. Jones some money so she could feed her children, or, helping Mr. Smith find a job, or making sure the sewers were running properly on Main Street, whatever, right? And then the progressives came along and saw this, and they're like, these filthy, disorganized, chaotic, un-American immigrants and their corrupt politics and their control of our cities, we've got to eradicate this. And so one of the things, they said many things, but one of the things was they said, we have to eliminate these corrupt police forces and replace them with, these were the words, professional, there you go, professional, trained, scientific, and rational policing. And so that's what they did. And they kicked out all the machine police forces and they replaced them with these military units. They were actually explicitly, deliberately designed as military units or like military units. And this is right at the time when, of course, the United States had just become an imperial power, had just taken over the Philippines and Cuba and effectively colonized those countries. So they sort of understood what it meant to rationalize a population, right, at the point of a gun. And that's what the police forces in this country became right at the turn of the century. And progressives thought this was great. This was not a conservative thing. This was progressives, right? This was like John Dewey and those cats, people from Columbia and Harvard. This was the egghead intellectual progressives.
I try to argue my system is actually conservative. My
maybe.
policing system is actually a conservative approach.
I think it might be, and that's super interesting, and I definitely want to get to that. And one of the things they also called for was the nationalization of policing. So there was no federal control at all over policing at that point. So the progressives said, this was when Teddy Roosevelt, progressive president, is in office, they said, we need a national police force that will oversee all this stuff, that will link up all these local disparate police forces. And what we need is to give them good data. We need to surveil the crime and have so that our police forces can better apprehend these people. And so they came up with, Teddy Roosevelt created the Bureau of Investigation in 1908, which became, of course, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Yeah, and what they did, the FBI, for the first 20 years of its existence, overwhelmingly what they did was police prostitution and drugs, because drugs had just become illegal for the first time. 1906 Food and Drug Act made forms of narcotics illegal. Prostitution and drugs. And then, of course, in the 1920s, they spent almost all their time, of course, policing booze under Prohibition. Look at that. Isn't that weird, right? Look at where we are now. We have all these same prohibitions, or many of the same prohibitions, and we have tremendous over-policing and highly rational, right, scientific, data-driven policing and militarized policing and nationalized policing. So the roots of that are in progressivism, I argue, and have argued in print recently. So when you said that, I said that's nothing new, but its history is misunderstood. People think of all the stuff that's going on with policing as this conservative thing. It ain't conservative at all. Now the conservatives kind of jumped on that bandwagon later in the 20th century. They were like, yeah, we should control these bad primitive animals in the cities. But the whole history, and there's several books now written by left scholars actually recently, making essentially that argument that all the shit that's going on now with policing and criminal justice, its roots are in what we now call liberalism and early liberalism in the early 20th and mid 20th centuries.
Remains that way though.
So I know,
bill and all,
I think you agree with all that, or at least that is consistent with your thinking. Okay, so the thing is, the progressives and their heirs. Like in the 1960s, Lyndon Johnson ramped this up. This is when he starts, the big money and the military equipment starts coming down from the federal government to the local police forces, and then Nixon ramps it up too. But Nixon was very much a social welfare progressive. People don't understand that. It's hard to find evidence that they were doing all of that with the intention of protecting capital, with protecting the wealthy. They were very clearly interested in protecting social order. Now, you could certainly say the social order was a capitalist order, and they certainly gave benefits to certain capitalist enterprises over other capitalist enterprises. But it wasn't just to keep the poor people from stealing the rich people's shit. It was they were concerned about chaos and disorder among the poor who weren't any threat to the rich. Like recently, in the last 40 years, all the over-policing and mass incarceration, right? That's all in response to crime just in the hood. It's not about poor people going into Beverly Hills and stealing stuff or killing rich people. It's about black people killing other black people. It's about poor people killing other black people or other poor people. It's about gangs in those neighborhoods. And in fact, I think, as you know, like there have always, I've heard you say this, in fact, that there have for decades been people in those neighborhoods, in those communities, who have been calling for this policing, who have been calling for harsh sentencing, mandatory minimums and all that. So I don't see the evidence for the argument that it is a capitalist or pro-capitalist or enterprise or an attempt to defend the capitalists.
Yeah, I would clearly agree that that's not an intent.
Okay.
It's because that's the way the structure was first set upon. So you have a framework that everyone else has continued to build upon, and then they're locked into that framework as being the answer. And I'm really glad that you spent about 10 minutes in that explanation, because what you did highlight was at the very beginning, it was built upon the premise that apprehending criminals solved crime, and it doesn't. So you are on a false premise the entire time. So they do not have science. They are not making scientific conclusions. They have not given it a scientific perspective because they are not understanding that their data is dog shit. When the first policing was done from Boston and did arrest where you're going and you're capturing slaves, and then you're returning them to the South, putting them a citation in the book, and then saying, well, who do we look at? We look at the people that we have citations on, and we have citations coming from that. So it's not that I ever make the argument that it's intentional. It's that this system was put this way because of these ideas, and what it does is policing encapsulates all of our society. It's everything expressed in one thing because all the variables of intensity come together at once.
Yeah. I will say that capitalism requires a pretty high degree of social order, right? It's just that the policing that you and I are so pissed off about, as I said, it takes place in essentially non-capitalist areas, right? Non-capitalist areas of our economy. These are people who aren't really part of the capitalist economy.
But they believe in it still.
Nor are they a threat in any way, right?
But they believe in the capitalist
economy.
But they believe in it still. And they are a threat.
Who
because
believes what?
So people in urban environments still believe in the capitalistic idea. They'll still espouse to their children that it's on you, even though that kid has 85,000 hurdles set up in his pathway. They'll still tell that kid, well, you need to learn how to jump over 85,000 hurdles. Yeah. So they still totally buy into that idea. That's why they still totally think that you can arrest your way out of crime. You're talking
about the tough on crime people in poor neighborhoods, poor areas.
Yeah, it's everywhere. I mean, it's not a unique idea to think that way. It's old people that don't have access to information. And it doesn't matter whether they're a poor white person in Virginia who doesn't have access to information, or it's a poor black person in Baltimore who doesn't have access to information. The problem is access to information.
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. Maybe we do agree more. I got worried there for a second. All right. So let's go back to the biography here. You're in the police force. You're a detective. You're doing violent crimes. You're doing some good work, you feel, but still, I take it you're seeing that much of what policing is policing of one thing, which is the drug trade. Is that right?
Oh, it's totally was just a drug trade. And I kind of factored into that. But really, so when I was a supervisor, let's say after I get promoted, I did narcotics and everything. When you do narcotic stuff, you see the drug world clearly doesn't work because you can rock up an entire gang. And then the next day, there will be a new replacement gang there. So,
I was going to say, though, your thing about it doesn't work arresting people. It does, I think.
If it's totalitarian.
Hang on. Right. If you arrest everybody. Right. In New York.
Sure.
I think that's...
No, God, no. That did not work. Stop.
I think that's why crime is lower. Because Giuliani he locked up everybody.
No, that is not why crime is lower.
He did in my neighborhood in New York.
Okay.
He locked up everybody.
Okay, you are taking a fucking correlation that is way out there, implying causality.
I would be happy to be wrong. I really would be.
So let me explain this to you.
Oh, yeah.
So those numbers, that technique has not been replicated anywhere in the country, despite hundreds of police departments trying to replicate it. So what kind of science can't be replicated? For one. For two, the largest correlate for violent crime is lead poisoning. Okay, it's down to the very blocks on a 22-year delay on violent crime. So what really happened is in 1973, the national government put in CAFE standards, taking the lead out of the gas. That took the lead out of the atmosphere. And once the lead was out of the atmosphere, we had 22 years later, we had a dramatic reduction in crime in the early 90s, which we attributed it to a whole bunch of other things. So that was from lead. Now,
wait. So you're saying the lead poisoning contributed to crime?
It's the number one correlation to violent crime in all of the entire world, in all of science, and we don't talk about it because criminal justice is a farce field.
Wow. Okay.
So what happened in the early 90s is that the public health department from New York City fought lead poisoning more than any other public health department in the entire world. The lead poisoning in New York City is the lowest lead poisoning of any city in this country. Mm-hmm. So 22 years later, no surprise, they have the lowest violent crime rate of any city in this country. And that is not because of policing, but despite policing, on the credit that goes to the public health department of New York City.
Maybe. Maybe
my ass.
If you're right. All right. So I'm saying even if you're right that it's lead poisoning, that really it's a function of poverty anyway, right? Because only the poor get lead poisoning.
It's intentional design. This is redlining and things like this. You intentionally
intentional.
So that's not it's
intentional impoverishment.
It is intentionally done. You can go back to the leased records.
Segregation
from redlining.
Yes.
So redlining was done around the areas that had environmental poisoning.
Yeah.
So when you had white flight, then they went out and they got water that didn't have lead pipes.
Yep.
So you intentionally put Black Americans in lead poisoned environments. That is not classism. That's racism, hands down.
Totally agree. Yeah. And the history is indisputable on that. The segregation, which was federally driven, by the way. And so the new histories of the New Deal are actually showing this, that the New Deal, Mr. Roosevelt, who we all love and we want to bring back, we want a New Deal. The housing program, the FHA, that was part of the New Deal, and there have been books written about this. This is not just me talking, was deliberately and explicitly, the policies coming out of that program were deliberately and explicitly segregationist. Mm-hmm. And
they had a color coding system. That's what redlining was. It was a color coding system on maps.
Yeah, but
Blacks go here.
I'm saying this was government policy. This was not like individual private actors doing this.
The mayor in Baltimore did it.
It also happened too. Of course, private entities did this as well. Covenants, right, in neighborhoods. But I'm talking about it was federal policy that made it impossible for Black people to live in certain places, right? And it actually essentially locked them into these neighborhoods. West Baltimore. In addition to making it impossible through various policies for Black people to own homes outside of inner cities, which is what the FHA did, the government, I think this was state, it could have been federal, I think it was state, built a freeway through West Baltimore. I don't know what it's called. It's called the Highway to Nowhere or something like that, right? And I was just reading an article about this, that to do that, it required destroying something like 2,000 houses. This was in a Black neighborhood at the time, and it was a thriving Black neighborhood. So under segregation, a lot of Black neighborhoods, a lot of Black areas in the South and in the Upper South, essentially, which is Baltimore, had these thriving business districts that were and it was all Black owned, right?
Well, that's where you get Black nationalism from, because it was better than what we have now.
For sure, yeah. And people, that's another sort of untold story about segregation. It's not an endorsement of segregation, people, but it is. We need to understand that we need to at least know that that's true, that there were thriving Black commercial and business areas under segregation. Anyway, so putting this freeway through West Baltimore destroyed that, kind of destroyed the Black capital of Baltimore. And since then, it has been, I think this highway is like a divider. It makes it very difficult or something to travel between one part of the city to the other. It just disrupts, the flow of people and the flow of commerce, and all of it just adds to the impoverishment of West Baltimore.
But it continues. It's not like segregation. They do it with bus lines.
Totally. So anyway, it's all government driven. So, all right, where were we? I'm still curious about how you came to all these ideas when you were a cop, man. It's just very curious.
Well, so let's look at this. So when I was a narcotics detective and I was sitting in covert and watching people, that thing that the world tells, like right now, if you go and you read people's comments to what I say, they're going to say things like, oh, I bet this white boy can't walk through West Baltimore on his own. Let's see what happens then. Let's walk him. If he walks through Southside Chicago, they'll get his ass and freaking rape him in the back corner and do all these things to them because these areas are so bad. Well, when you're there and nobody knows you're there, you quickly realize that this neighborhood is no different from any other neighborhood you've ever been in. The grandma's there, the haircutting's there, the kids there, the brother's trying to go to school, the little brother's trying to rush to get onto the bus. All these things are happening that are just regular society, and almost to like how once you measure something, you corrupt it because of the presence of the measurement device. It was clear that my presence had affected the dynamic of every exchange I had been in the city, that the city only looked bad when I had that blue uniform and put my face in it. So I was the variable that was making it.
Well, wait, you don't want to say, I mean, I think I agree with you, but you don't want to say that those areas are or were less violent, had just as much crime as
it has nothing to do with the area. So I need to shed that from everybody very fast. It's not a geography issue other than the people have been intentionally put into geographies that have more hurdles in them. But we have to separate that these are people that are exposed to certain conditions, and any people exposed to those conditions will be that way. One of those conditions was a white oppressor, an occupier. And that presence,
the cops.
My presence in that changed the dynamic. In Baltimore,
they're not white.
It is a black police department, sure, but we have to go on another argument that would be sidetracked. But
let's do that.
Like, so
we haven't talked about race.
I don't classify black as a race.
Okay.
So it's not up to me to define that term, but my perspective is that
no, I just mean that according to American standards,
right? So
black
just
people
because you're black and you put on a uniform, that doesn't mean you're not executing white.
According to the American definition of black, it's a black police department, right?
Yeah. So it's
I agree with you.
Melanated.
It's a social construct, and there's multiple cultures within every designated race, et cetera. Sure, but I mean, according to Americans, right?
Black individuals executing
people who are defined as black, and for the most part define themselves as black. I'm sure, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. That's what we're talking about. So
I would disagree with most people how they define themselves black, and then I realize I don't have any really place to tell anybody how they define themselves, so I have to move on from that definition.
So one of the old arguments that I don't hear much anymore because it's so clearly been disproven, is that what we need is more black cops.
No, I mean,
and then we'll have less brutality and all that stuff. In fact, I think the studies have pretty consistently shown that black cops are more likely to use.
NWA told you that was true.
That's what I always say. I always say that. NWA let us know this a long time ago, but it's been backed up by statistics. So that black cops are actually a little bit more likely to use deadly force, I believe.
I don't know.
Certainly not any less likely.
We don't know deadly force. But
to use force.
We only know force. We don't. Except deadly force is the thing they don't like to track. So my theory on that hypothesis, more accurately, is that it's because it's seen as a personal slight. So it makes you respond more violently.
What is a personal slight?
The suspect being of the same race.
Oh, okay.
So I think I felt myself being more aggressive with white offenders, suspects.
Just like the guy who handcuffed me.
So, and that may be that way because when I was in the low educated white neighborhood, I would look down upon them in a more harsh way than I would in the black community. So it's rather fair to assume that they were coming from the same perspective.
Is it like that they're embarrassing you?
Yeah.
I've heard that about black cops. I'm not going to say it's true because I've never been a black cop, but it makes sense at least on one level.
From 11 years of observation, I'm fairly confident in that.
Yeah, and black cops generally, just like cops in general, come out of what you could either call like a, stable working class or sort of middle class, lower middle class background, right? They're not actual, they're not hood rats. They're not
because
people.
When you get that record, you can't be a cop.
Yeah. So. And so there's there's discipline of that kind already. There's in the families generally, and there's sort of
they probably grew up in one of those black families that said they were Christian, and they said, do as you're told. They said
respectability is a thing, right? Church is a thing, all that. Yeah, so it makes sense. And this is true for, white ethnic cops too, right?
I'm saying I didn't see a difference.
Yeah. So. No, I totally agree. Okay. So again, so how did you, you left. Why did you leave? You left in like 08, 09?
In the police department?
Yeah.
So I had been ostracized. The defining moment, okay, like we can't get to me leaving without the ostracizing part. Mm-hmm. So that was in the defining moment of our unprofessionalism was in like late 2009. I was a sergeant, and our lieutenant was one of those people that was like kind of into the professionalism, into the history, and like wanted to know all the histories of everything. It was like read about it all the time. And so he wanted to like increase the professionalism of our shift and start quizzing them so that they could be past the promotional tests and things like that. So he wanted to ask them what an arrest was, like to define an arrest. And I said, LT, like these guys can't even define what an arrest is. They don't know. He said, of course they do. I said, no, dude, they don't know. So we go in there and he asked them the question, and nobody can define what an arrest is. So I came back into the office and I kind of gloated with him and was like, I told you, dumbass, they don't know anything. I was right. And after a little bit of silence, we looked at each other and we're like, we're supervisors. We just identified a huge flaw in our shift. It's now our personal responsibility to fix this. So 2 other supervisors covered for me on a lot of responsibilities for about 2 years while I sat down and wrote a 518-page guide on how to be the perfect professional police officer and pass the promotional exams and how you should do every last thing, and put that out into the hands and started teaching people how to be more professional, giving them free classes on how to get promoted, because I was kind of thinking that if all of us that bitched about how bad things were didn't step up into leadership and take those reins, then we had no room to bitch. So like, here's all the tools we need to do this. The first group of 50 promotees, 25 were people that I had taught. So the moment that much ideology from one person entered into the power structure, I was quickly shut out.
So that was all very progressive of you, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Attempting to professionalize the force.
Yes, I agree.
By writing a 500-page, what is it, guide, manual. Mm-hmm. Very progressive. I mean, that comes right out of the early 20th century, the people I was talking about. All right, so they didn't like that, and you got tossed.
No, they really didn't like that at all. Got threatened a bunch of times, told them I was going to leave it out there. That's too bad. And so I got put into like headquarters, and then I got put in charge of logistics, and then eventually they put me in charge of the courthouse security.
Was there any sort of racial resentment within the force against you?
No. Quite the opposite. The police department is very racist internally. A black officer is an extreme victim of all the types of discrimination within the ranks as well. Okay,
but it is, again, according to American definitions, right? It is a majority black department.
Sure, doesn't matter.
And the chief or whatever it's called is also black?
Okay, so what happens is...
Right? Yeah, okay.
So one of my first discoveries is I had access to the database because they do stupid things like, let's punish Mike and put him in charge of something where he has access to information, which is foolish. But they did that. And so I could see the roster of the entire police department. And when I had that roster and started analyzing it, right around 60% of the officers were black. It gets down to about 50% of detectives, 45% of sergeants, 40% of lieutenants. Right. And as you go up, it dwindles until you get to the very top where they put in the tokens. Mm-hmm. And so that's when it looks like balance. It is not actually balance. It still remains that, because those people that are in the top that are black, that have influence, are not fitting the definition of black that I'm going to define.
Okay, but this comes back to, I guess, what I was getting at earlier. But what if it were made all black? Do you think would business be conducted differently? Would it be not a racist department anymore?
No, I mean, because you're just going to select yourself into those types of people, or going to be the ones that still join the police department. I mean, that's why I don't define black as the way you're going to generally define it. I think black is that which stands against supremacy. I don't think it has to do with race, because we can have a system of Ottoman rule where we would have brown power, but we all still need to be black in the concept of being against the supremacist control.
Yeah, I mean, there's a long history of African American, basically middle class, opposition to black culture. actually. I mean, and Martin Luther King was a part of that.
And I'll shed black culture. So
what's that?
And I'll shed the term of black culture.
Well,
I would love somebody to define what black culture is.
You know, I mean, you will ask them. I mean, since,
I can't, because black is that which stands against white supremacy. So I can't just ask somebody with melanin in their skin what black culture is, because they have no fucking idea.
I'll just tell you how it's been defined by like civil rights leaders all the way back to Frederick Douglass, who was also part of this.
Sure.
I.W. Wells, Frederick Douglass, A. Philip Randolph, Martin Luther King, Bayard Rustin, you name it, all of them, Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, all of them have said that there are things that black people do, behaviors and attitudes, that are outside the norm, outside the dominant culture, i.e. white. And some of them were explicit about that. They actually named it white. But so like things back in the day, like jazz was considered, W.E.B. Du Bois thought that jazz was a terrible thing, that black people should be playing classical music. A. Philip Randolph thought that there should be no black vaudeville performers. They should all be doing Shakespeare. Martin Luther King was explicit. He hated rock and roll, was totally against it, said it was the devil's music. Mm-hmm. Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton had organized marches against disco and then hip hop. Mm-hmm. You know, and then also talking about along the way, all of them, all those leaders in the last 150 years have talked about, you know, black promiscuity, black drinking, black criminal behavior, and that they needed to conform, and this was actually the words used, conform to the dominant white culture. So that's how they defined black culture, right?
That's methodology.
Which actually makes, no, I know, but within that framework,
They're just wrong.
It's not wrong. Within the framework, it's correct that there was.
They created the framework, and then you can't create the framework and then say whether it's right or wrong. It's just wrong. It's wrong thinking. Well, I don't care if Martin Luther King said it. If it's wrong, it's wrong.
Okay, what's wrong about it?
Because there is no such thing as black culture. It's not a thing. Just because somebody in authority said it, it sounds no different to me than a bunch of old people in white culture saying the same thing, saying, "Oh no, Elvis. Oh no, Marilyn Manson." Oh, like it's no different. It's old people talking down to young people, which happens in every freaking culture I can think of.
So you want to say that the blues, for instance, is not black culture? Would you say that?
No, it came from black originators. It's not black culture.
What's the difference?
I mean, I just went to a Jack White concert, about 6 of them, and it was an all-white crowd playing blues.
Oh, sure. I mean, then it was later appropriated,
of
right?
course.
Is the word? Yeah, by others. Sure. Yeah, like
and
all
it
cultures.
Should be, because there is no such thing as something that's isolated within. That is a gift that black people gave the entire world.
No, I know. And then when whites first started playing that music, you know what they were called?
I don't care, because it was old people calling them that.
Well, no, they were called white niggers, right?
And it was
a terrible thing to do.
By who? 60-year-old white people in charge of things. But 60-year-old people in charge of things, it's not because they're white. It's because they're 60-year-old people that will refuse to adapt to information.
I don't think we disagree, actually, on this. I don't think. I mean,
black culture is just not a thing, and I don't care how many people I have to fight on that subject. Well, it's not.
I don't quite get that. I mean,
are you in white culture?
What's that?
Like you sitting here in this environment?
Sure. I mean, of course, it's not like absolutely.
Will it suddenly be not white culture if we put on a Danny Brown song?
Hang on a second. So, you know, there are cultures that, as you said, originated with certain groups or were created by certain groups.
I hate to argue over things all the time, but like nothing is actually created by anybody. We are all so like nobody wrote like. So what is a performer now? Like Kendrick Lamar, who I have ones I have problems with, so I just use him because he's on the tip of my tongue, and somebody I don't like for reasons I can't purely define.
Yeah.
So like when he's out there, and what was my point? Where was I even going with that?
There's no such thing as black culture.
Okay. So when he's out there saying all these messages and putting all this image, and we're all saying that that's black culture, like I know hundreds of black people in the city that entire neighborhoods have nothing at all to do with that.
Or are opposed to it.
Sure.
I know.
So it's just, I'm sorry, it's not black culture. It's just not. It's culture.
I mean,
and nobody created anything. So when Kendrick Lamar writes those songs, like there's nothing original about what he's writing. Everything is a conglomeration of all of his influences in life.
Sure.
So he can say, like he can arrogantly say, I'm playing black music, but he's been influenced by white artists.
Oh, sure. And no doubt about it.
So he's wrong if he thinks he's playing black music. Because at best, he's playing 80% black music.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So we're just, it's not right.
I don't know. I mean, so, even the blues had European musical structure to it.
Of course, that's what I mean.
It doesn't come straight from West Africa. Of course,
course.
We've all known this. This is not news to anybody, I hope. But, I do think it is. And of course, I think race is a social construct. So when I say black, it's always in quotes.
Sure.
Okay. But those quotes, as you agreed with me earlier, is meaningful. It's real in this world that we live in.
It's something we have to fight because it's not real.
Totally agree with that too. Okay. So okay. Yeah. I mean, that is tricky. I don't know what to do with that though. Like I do think
I'm bitching all the time because
we're good, man. I think with you and me, it's funny. The more we talk, the closer we get. It seems, we'll see. We'll probably hit a third rail eventually. No, it is tricky for me because I am, as a lot of people know, I am deeply committed to deconstructing these social constructs, right? And race being one of them. But then again, I don't know what to do with the fact that I think much of what we call black culture, to me, is preferable to much of what we call white culture, or what we think of as the dominant culture.
I'm going to totally agree with you on that statement, but I'm going to say ethnicity and not race.
Yeah, whatever. Sure. Oh, totally. But at the same time, I know damn well that race is a total social construct, that the whole thing is bullshit, superstition, right? And I want to, and I think it's very strange, right? It's like, I guess I'm struggling with this right now.
I feel like
not right now, but I mean, like, recently I've been thinking about this. Hang on. So, it's like, I think that the construction of race has been largely, maybe entirely pernicious, right? That it's never been a good thing. But then at the same time, like the people we call black in this country have done all these things that without them, this country would suck for me. And a lot of us.
Yeah, musically
really
it would be disastrous.
Yeah, like goddamn, hell no. Take the immigrants and the gays and the blacks out of here. I am not interested in the United States at all. Like I'm done, except for maybe the mountains and the, a couple deserts, whatever. But then what do we do with that, right? It's like these people were defined as X, black, whatever, race thing. And then they very quickly defined themselves that way and thought of themselves that way. And they are the ones like Kendrick Lamar saying, I'm doing black music, right? This is a black thing. And so within the frame of American culture broadly, they're correct. You would agree with that, right? Within that game, you can call it a game, they're correct, right? Within those rules. But you and I know that those rules are just made up, right? And so, but you and I like the stuff that those self-defined black people made. So what do we want to call it?
I want to call it the things that those people made. I want Malcolm X to be known as Malcolm X, not the black leader Malcolm X.
I'm into that. You're kind of like, you know what you just did? You just like made the pure Thad Russell argument, actually. You're making the argument that if I were being pure and true to myself, that's what I would say. That's right. You're right. See, we're good. We're working it all out here.
I think we're always good to begin with.
Yeah, no, I think so too. No, I was instructed that you sucked before I got here. I'll let you know that.
Oh, by who?
I'm not going to tell you.
Okay, that's awesome.
I'll tell you later.
That's cool. But you were making me think of something
and I didn't know,
that construct.
I didn't really know you. I knew just a little bit, the surface, and like a little bit of the language, and the fact that you fought me about food deserts kind of made me think, yeah, probably not going to like this guy. But anyway. We're working it out, man. See, it's all about love and understanding. That's what this podcast is all about. All right. So what the fuck do we do, man? Listen, so mass incarceration, just that. Okay, police brutality, that's kind of an argument there that I've been changing my mind about wanting to kill cops. And I think that actually, I think you may disagree with me on this, I don't know. But like, I think that chasing racists, or who we think might be racist, or chasing racism really is what goes on, right? Whenever something bad happens in the criminal justice system, the default for most people now, or a lot of people now, is, oh, it's racist, and that's the problem, and that's what we have to deal with. It's like, if you eliminated, as you just said, if you eliminated all the racists from a police department, the same shit's going to go down, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I just did a video for TYT of 5 minutes long explaining how going after racist cops is a complete distraction.
For the Young Turks video.
Yeah. I think any individual aspects are foolishness. These are things that are systems. They don't have to, you can change all the names all you want. That's irrelevant. I'm talking about a system. And I went in with a high level of morality, and I've always tried to be a good person to a level, and that was impossible for me to do in that system. So I know that system can't function. It must be that we look at it. So I don't care. I don't even care if the cop has Nazi tattoos up and down his arm and he thinks that all black people are the worst in the entire world, but he goes out and does his job in a completely non-racist way that is exactly what the black community wants him to perform. I don't give a damn what's going on in his mind. I care about how he treats those people in the end.
Yeah. So you, am I right, as a superintendent, directed officers underneath you to conduct essentially racial profiling. Is that right? Did you tell them to ignore the white guys?
So I did both sides of that.
Go
where
ahead.
I would ignore white people because believing that the data said that these things would happen, and that's where we should be looking. And I intentionally went after white people when I could see that our numbers wouldn't look good.
So, all right, maybe we're about to hit the third rail. Would you say that racial profiling, I think it should never be policy. I think it should never be law. I think that is just grotesque in all kinds of ways. However, I think it is not irrational.
I do.
You do think it's irrational?
Yeah,
you think that crime rates among black people, as we define them, are not higher than among whites?
No, I don't. And I think...
Really?
Yeah, not because they're black, because they're in a certain structure. So it doesn't have to
Oh, no,
do
of
with
course, it's
being,
not biologically determined.
But it doesn't have to do with being black. So if you're a white person that grows up in the exact same neighborhood, you just have a few less hurdles in front of you. You're most likely going to be in the exact same dynamic, consequentially. So if I was... the problem is when I look for anything race related or physical appearance related, it is not a variable in the actual crime causation other than outside influences.
I'm just saying, if you're a cop on the beat, wouldn't you be...
No, because race is not a causation of crime.
No, of course not.
See, that's the fundamental flaw.
It's not a causation.
Right.
No,
so what should police be doing? Solving.
It's a causation.
Say
What?
Solving
crime.
Crime.
Yeah.
Is race a causation of crime?
Okay, I think it is in one way. Okay, so here is my listen. Hang on. So one of my great frustrations, and not sure you're doing this, but a great tendency in fact, on the Young Turks, I got shouted at for saying this, but anyway, a great tendency on the left to respond to the overwhelming data that crime among African Americans, as we define them, over the last 50, 100 years. Hang on.
No, you don't have data. You don't have data.
Well,
do not tell me that the overwhelming data exists when you don't have data. All you have is what the police have reported to you. Mm-hmm. That's it. It's a self-reported survey, and you're calling it data. It's not.
Oh, well, okay, so then there's no data, you mean?
There isn't.
Oh, there's no data at all. There never can be.
No, there can be if we start from scratch of actually trying to solve crime.
You're saying there's no good data at all about policing in this country?
Not
from ever?
No.
Ever in this country?
That's the problem. We have to restart the entire field. So this is my entire model, is that we restructure policing to be something that actually serves the people and their interests. And so their metrics, their output, right now they judge outputs and they don't judge inputs. Okay. So we have to have a system where the who is subjected to the output guides the inputs, and we have to start collecting data in earnest, which is how do you prevent crime and how do you solve crime. So if somebody robs a bank, everybody in this entire history of policing has decided to investigate the details of how that person committed the bank robbery. Never has anyone ever investigated in policing why they committed the robbery to begin with in order to prevent the next robbery from occurring.
The social causes of the crime, right? Is that what you mean?
No. I don't care what it is.
Or
What's
psychological.
the cause?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Right. That's all. I want to know what.
It's just a phenomenon. Right.
You must ask what is the cause of this individual for committing a robbery.
Agreed.
And if you've never asked the question, your data is shit.
Okay. Let me try this. Let me try it a different way. So, a people defined by the social structure, okay, not by you and me. We agree it's a social construct, but the social construct was created, right, to justify their enslavement. You know, that social construct was called race and racism.
Or oppression.
Well, no, it was more specific than that, right? It was...
Well, Italians and Jews and Irish were also black at the time.
I have written extensively about that. Yeah, that's a big part of my book. No, but, you know, Thomas Jefferson got the ball rolling with Notes on the State of Virginia by having this like taxonomy of black people and their physical features and saying this is all part of the fact that they are less industrious than white people are, et cetera, right? And so scientific racism is what I'm talking about. That was born in the basically early 19th century, and it became like a full-blown science by the early 20th century. So it's being taught in classrooms at Harvard and Yale and Columbia, right? It is the dominant way of thinking about race in this country, and it explains why those people had to be enslaved and why we now have to segregate them, right? This is not news. Now, the effect of that on black people has actually been, I think, underappreciated in a way. Some scholars have talked about this, and I've written about this, but it's, you know, you do see from the beginning of that, not universal at all, but a general tendency to not feel a part of America, right? Stands to reason. These aren't stupid people. Mm-hmm. If they are told they're not American, that they're inferior to Americans, we will not let you participate in America. We will not give you the benefits of being an American, all that stuff. And also, we're not going to expect you to take responsibility, by the way, right? So we're not going to draft you. We're not going to have you serve in combat. We're not going to make you cops. We're not going to make you do any of those things, all that shit work, right? We'll do it ourselves because we're superior. It's kind of one of the great ironies of being white in this country over the last 300 years, right? We will go and fight and die for stupid imperialist wars. We won't let the black people do that because they're not as good as we are. White people have been amazing in that way. So black people, not all of them, but there's been a general tendency, I argue, and other historians have argued, James Baldwin was one of them, to say, fine, have your America. We're not that interested in it anyway, right? And when you come to us and mess with us, we are much more likely to have no feeling of kinship with you, no solidarity with you, than to join in whatever you want us to do, right? And so this is what I call African-American oppositional culture, and I see a long lineage. And other scholars have, I think, made essentially the same argument without using that terminology. But that does sort of stand to reason, right? That would be a response to that treatment by
of course.
By whites. Yeah.
So I think it's the wrong answer, but it's understandable.
Okay. So, you know, and then it's segregation, and then it's redlining, all the stuff we talked about, right? And so by the 1960s, and then you have the war on drugs, and of course, which began, as I said, in the early 20th century. And when you create a black market, as you have said, the criminals, the people who aren't assimilated into the dominant culture, are the ones who are going to fill that black market, right? That was not just black people, it was also Italians and Jews who at that time were unassimilated. Again, they had no feeling of kinship with America because they had been excluded and called bad names too, and were considered to be black, as you said, right? And so what happens is in the 1950s and 60s, liberals come along, black and white liberals, and they say, hey, we got this whole population here, 10% or more of the population, who are doing nothing for us. We're fighting the Soviets. We're trying to become the great superpower. We're trying to become the richest nation in the history of the world. We could make those black people down there in the ghetto workers, productive workers. We could make them into soldiers. They could fight in our wars for us. The thing is, and this is what they all said, this is what was in the literature at the time, the problem is those people don't give a fuck about us. In fact, they don't like us. In fact, they're more likely to stab us than to serve in our military. If we give them a gun, they're going to shoot their commanding officers instead of the Vietnamese, right? So we got to get them into our schools. So we need to desegregate the schools. That's the number one thing we got to do. And that was the argument for Brown v. Board of Education in 1954. It's actually in the text of the decision by the Supreme Court. It said public education is the necessary means to train citizens and soldiers to serve our country. We are denying ourselves as a country that, right? Those bodies, that labor, that service. We have to train them to be efficient and all that, but most of all, we have to sort of welcome them to our table, into our country. That was liberalism's answer, right? Now, a whole bunch of black people went along with that, right?
Still is.
Definitely. Okay. And that was basically the civil rights movement responded to that, right? That's what it was. It was a response to that and said, yes, we need to become fully assimilated American citizens. So rock and roll, get rid of that. Jazz, blues, black slang, all that shit. Anything that's distinctive, right, to our culture, to black people's culture, to slave culture, we must get rid of that. And we must become...
Except the Christianity, of course.
What we're supposed to be. Well, no. In fact, King and his company, King and Company said, this is a quote, "We can't be singing Negro spirituals anymore. We can't be preaching like Negro preachers anymore. We have to preach the real gospel."
So they can keep the Christianity. That's what I'm saying.
No. Keep the Christianity.
Oh, but even take the white Christianity version. Gotcha.
Michael, is a thing, right?
Yeah.
Black slaves and their descendants had a totally different or very different take on Christianity, right? Sure. Everybody knows this if you've ever been in a black church on a Sunday versus a white church. So King knew this too, and he said, we got to stop that. We got to stop doing this Negro Christianity and do the white thing. And when we do that, when we assimilate and show that we're worthy, show that we're just like white people, then they'll let us be full citizens. And he was sort of right? Because just right after that, the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act gave them legal full first-class citizenship. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing, right? So, a bunch of the black middle class and some of the working class became part of that movement, and they're still with us, right? Civil rights leaders and their descendants. But a lot of people who were defined as black and self-defined as black didn't go along with that and just kind of did their own thing, right? And so when they see cops come into their neighborhood, they are hostile to cops. They don't see them as their saviors. They don't see them as their friends. They see them as the enemy, which makes a lot of sense to me because historically, that's what had gone down. Authority figures coming from the state, no matter this color of their skin, right? So that is what I have kind of embraced, just that oppositional feeling among so-called African Americans, right? Because I think that's very healthy to have that kind of not just skepticism, but like actually hostility, like an oppositional attitude toward the state and authority.
Yeah, okay, but is it just because of that or because they're aware of something like that King and those paradigms were the acceptable paradigms of whiteness? It was the blackness you were allowed to express at that time. So those resistors can be the ones that are just really seeing reality in that we are being integrated into a burning building.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think your burning building is a little bit different than mine. Like what I think is burning is a little bit different than what you think is burning. But yeah, the reason I like that oppositional culture is that I'm not a big fan of what they were asked to enter. Yes. Right. The building. I don't like the building much. I mean, I think the building. So here's the thing about the building. It's really well constructed. This is my view. I'm not sure. This is probably not your view entirely, but the building is really well constructed, super solid. It's going to last forever. But like it's painted gray and it's totally square shape, right? And has no color in it. And I'm not talking about race here. That's kind of the old Puritan New England, dominant ethic, right? Which of course slaves just completely just ran counter to. Anyway, so that I think explains why African Americans, when they see cops, are much more likely today to, as I said, feel at war with them, compared to whites who see cops generally speaking.
But they are at war with them. It's not a perception. I mean, it's numerically supported.
Oh, totally. Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. No doubt about that.
But it's not their reaction. So it's like, you know what I mean? It's like it's an imposed position, not a
that's my
choice.
Point. Well, they could have. You can still choose to side with your oppressor, right? I mean, people have done that. This is what's great.
We're getting into free will and psychology, and then we're going to go down another path. But
to me, this is what's great about what I call black culture. Okay, is that it hasn't done that, and it has remained oppositional. Yeah, lots of people. Look, the Japanese were shit on harder than any other group in this country's history after slavery. I mean, they had their land and property just taken from them. They were put in concentration camps, okay? And then like 10 years later, they are the model minority and they're doing everything they're supposed to do. And they're good citizens. They're serving in the military. Daniel Inouye, the senator, is getting his arm blown off in the Pacific War, right? When his people are being imprisoned in concentration camps. So people have responded to oppressors in many different ways. There's not just one way, right? Mm-hmm. And in fact, the civil rights leadership, they had a very different way. They were like,
I got to push back on the Japanese thing, though, because one reason why immigrant populations are specifically different from the slave trade is that we use visas and stuff like that to pick the top off of Asian cultures. So even when we say that they have become the perfect culture, but they haven't like become that. We have self-selected those people that have met that paradigm to even allow in to begin with. So it's not like they assimilated; they were drafted.
I mean, I'm just saying. Inouye's family was put in concentration camps, and he served in the military in the Pacific War, killing Japanese.
No, that's
totally
right.
Did so like with great pride.
Right. I just don't want to think that like they became these model citizens, because even when we're talking about immigrants, that like your doctor, like we could easily say, oh, look at how great the Saudi immigrants are, the Pakistani immigrants are, because they're all doctors, and it's like, well, those individuals didn't achieve that because of their own free will. They did that because their families over in the other countries are rich and they're in the oligarchy there. So now you're taking those same people that execute colonization and supremacy and you're bringing them to your country and you're praising them.
Yeah. I mean, I think that goes on. I think there's other stuff too, but I agree with that. I'm even more radical on the Japanese. I mean, I think that the internment of the Japanese was not irrational, because they had, by that point, by 1941, the Japanese in this country had a whole lot of reasons to hate the fuck out of Americans, because this is before incarceration.
Well, then you would be justifying concentration camps for black, because I guarantee you that every black community is going through fuck all more.
Yeah, well, sure.
Generationally.
No, I'm not justifying it. I'm saying, of course not. I'm saying that there was reason to be afraid of Japanese Americans, because in the 10s, 20s, and 30s, this is before internment, state of California passed laws, the alien land laws, that made it illegal for Japanese to own land. This is when Japanese were the best farmers in California, right?
Still essentially illegal for black people to own land.
Okay. Anyway, I don't know about that, but anyway,
by the structures they set up, so we can't even skip past that. So
fine.
like even in the housing boom, 70% of black wealth was destroyed. In the housing boom. So like we put up systems that just because they don't do it directly, they do it through a back door, we act like don't exist anymore.
Sure. I mean, as we said before, it's like, not to mention redlining, right? Which made it very difficult, almost impossible for them to break out of those neighborhoods. I'm just saying. I don't even know where we are. I mean, I think we might be agreeing. So, all right.
I just have to object that those communities now, by your definitions, would have you would then be making the case that we should put concentration camps in for...
No, I'm just calling...
Because the way we're treating black America has a much bigger reason that they should push back.
No, I'm actually making the more radical argument. I'm calling the lie on the whole system. What I'm saying is that Japanese Americans had reason to be disloyal to the United States, right? And this is what pisses me off about liberals, right?
So there's this black Americans, though.
There's this constant pretense that that Japanese Americans were good American citizens. Some of them were, like Daniel Inouye. Some of them were. But a lot of them, we don't know for sure because it's been hidden. A lot of them were not. They donated money to the Japanese Empire. Many of them served. They volunteered. They left the United States and served with the Japanese military during the war, right, et cetera. And that makes sense to me. So what I'm doing is actually exposing anti-Japanese racism, which was horrendous in the 10s, 20s, and 30s, okay? I'm not saying it was reason to intern them. I'm saying they're my heroes. The ones who actually opposed the American empire are my heroes, okay? I don't want them behind bars. I want them to be as free as anybody. Okay, so here's what we're going to do right now. We're going to solve everything. All right, you ready?
In 1 5-minute summary?
No, we got this. We got this. Because I think I know what your answer is to this. You call it, am I right, civilian-led policing? Is that right?
I do.
Okay.
Yes.
Tell us what that is.
Well, it should be community-led policing. I have to call it civilian-led policing because, as in everything with our language, somebody took that damn word and bastardized it into something else. So let's go with, I never know how I want to approach this because we are talking about a bold concept in humans' minds that for some reason shouldn't be. So here's the basic premise. We can accept the idea that when our cops do something wrong, that we should have some kind of say over what happens to them. So where we judge the output. So our country's kind of saying right now, Like, we understand that when these cops do bad, we need to be the ones that say what happens. And what I'm trying to tell everybody is that is correct. But if you do that in isolation, then what you will do is you put the officer in even a worse situation, because they are being judged on an outcome that all their inputs, everybody's telling them to arrest somebody and their career depends on them being arresting somebody. But when they do it and it goes wrong, then their career is over. So you're just creating a cornered individual who has more problems and can't solve anything and get out of it. So the solution to that is what we have done in this country with great aptitude, which is, let's use Exxon. And so when Exxon, we know they're a global dominant company right now, and they're vicious at it, but they're vicious at it because they have a legal fiduciary responsibility to capitalize their profits. They do this through a board that is board members who set guidance down to a CEO and tells them, these are the outcomes that you will achieve, and you will do it now and go. And if you don't do that, you're out of here. So if we use that system and we transport that over to policing, and we say the police department now has a fiduciary legal responsibility to serve the community by the outcomes that they desire, then we can have a system that goes forth, which the inputs and the outputs are aligned, and you can circumvent and mitigate all these problems that we're really having. Because if the conservatives have been right about one damn thing, it's local control with metrics that align to an actual representative sample of the population. That shit works. And so we want to go to a place where we have goals of abolishment. So I think abolishment is the right way to go. But how do we get
what?
there?
Abolition of what?
A police.
Oh, okay.
So how do we get there? Well, we want a situation where we have less guns, and we want to do that in some way, shape, or form. So the only way I can do this is by you telling me how you want your child be policed. Because the reality is if you can dictate how your child is going to be policed, you don't want your child in a more dangerous situation. You don't want that gun around them. So what you will do is you'll say, no, I don't want those guns in my school, when you know it will make your child more dangerous. So then we can align these metrics, and you have an army that can fight all these things. So even when somebody says, well, we're going to go in here and the feds are going to come in with our FBI or our ICE agents, and we're going to deport all of your citizens. I want a system where the citizens can unite and tell their cops to turn around and say, no, you're not. And an actual police department that works for them and isn't the personal army of an oligarch.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. I think once again, we're in general agreement here. Especially when you said you're for abolition, because I think that's where we have to go to.
It is the goal. And everybody that's right about that is the goal. It's the problem is we have a systems and we have institutions in place which don't make that possible right now. We have to go into this slowly and create a perpetual system that self-improves constantly. And the way that we can easily do that with policing is to set up all these little things so that you are actually controlling what they do, and you will want them gone. And we have an infrastructure that can replace all the things we do with them by using that police department's infrastructure. It's already there.
Right. So making them accountable, right, to the community that they police.
I'm going to go farther than that.
Okay.
I'm making the community accountable because they're one.
Even better.
Yeah, they're not separate. So you can't do an anti-police protest in civilian-led policing model because you're in control. Change it.
Yeah, all these laws that you and I hate that we believe has led to mass incarceration, namely the prohibitions on various things that consenting adults do, right? It's not just drugs, it's prostitution, it's gambling, right? So those were all democratically determined laws, right? These are laws that Americans, you've said this, that Americans wanted. This wasn't imposed by a dictator. These are things that Americans clamored for, in fact. And a lot of Black Americans clamored for them too. So,
which is why I don't have a democracy either. I have a purposeful sampling of
You mean you're not calling for a democracy? Is that what you mean?
No, by any means.
Yeah.
Democracy doesn't work.
So, okay. I like that too.
So, I'm not using random sampling. I'm using purposeful sampling to get a specific type of people who aren't going to be so easily fall into.
So instead of democracy, what are you calling for? What is the system?
I guess it's a type of republic in a certain argument. So the idea, the board is selected by a jury pool type of idea where we can get different types in there, but different standards. But the general idea is we offer out to the public, you can work on this board for a 2-year term for $100,000 a year. It's a full-time job. And to get onto the list, it's like a draft. So you can sign up, and I wanted to take people to do like an MIT month-long class on critical thinking. That's all. That's my purposeful sampling. So if you pass this class of purposeful sampling, you get into the pool of general people who we will then do a draft in for who gets the next 2. So we have to do a lottery because that way you're keeping all these corruptions out.
Okay. Yes. Are you calling for decentralized republics, essentially? These are local. This is a localism thing, isn't it?
As far as police departments are concerned, absolutely. And a big reason for that is all these cities and municipalities are very unique in what they need policing to be.
Yep.
For instance, in Baltimore, we have a huge dirt biking culture.
The 12 o'clock boys.
Correct. Yeah, I'm glad you know that.
I love that.
So
that documentary. Yeah.
So what that should be done is integrated into the type of policing that is done in Baltimore. That shouldn't be arguing thing. We should find a way to all get along, make that work. If that involves the police department shutting down swaths of blocks like they do for white marathons, then I'm fine with that. But that might not be applicable for Cleveland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So decentralized republics, right? This is your community.
A methodology that will work anywhere, because if my methodology doesn't work anywhere, then it's crap.
Uh-huh. Yeah. But you're talking about that, right?
I'm talking about the recipe.
You're talking about local control.
The pizza you make is on you.
Is that right, though? Is that a way to put it?
Totally.
Local control.
Totally. Yeah, conservative ideology, less money. I want to kill the budget because I want to replace it. I think even these ideas that we have that a cop should be doing a car stop. Why? 99.99999% of car stops are completely routine. Nothing's going to happen. And of those 0.00001% where something does happen, does that happen because the cop has a gun? Or does that happen because of the situation? I think it happens a lot of times more because the cop has a gun. So then we still end up in a job that's way more safe than being a taxi driver, and we didn't put any citizens at risk.
Yeah. I like it. I think I like it. As long as I have a choice about where I can live, right?
Of course.
Yeah, because...
and a protection I have to build into this is an anti-gentrification protection.
Because I'm thinking that the local republic in, let's say San Diego County, is not going to be the most fun place to be. You know what I mean?
Sure, I get what you're saying. But I think that the purposeful sampling does mitigate a lot of...
What does that mean? I guess I missed that. What does purposeful sampling mean?
So I'm not just choosing anybody. I'm only choosing people, for one, that are willing to work on this for 2 years, who are willing to be in a jury pool, who are willing to take and pass a critical thinking class, because you're not going to have somebody that makes $300,000 a year want to sign up for your local control guidance because they don't want to give up their job for 2 years.
No, I'm talking about, this is your vision for how society should change, right? This is a vision of a new society, or at least a new way that policing is conducted, right? That's...
Yeah. So I guess if we change policing that much, we're fundamentally changing society.
Yeah, and so it sounds to me like you're sketching out a picture of police forces being fully integrated with local communities, and you don't even want to say controlled by the local communities because you're saying they're part of it. So it's really truly community policing you're talking about. It is abolition, actually.
Yeah, because what I want to do is, even though I want to rechange what we're calling police, because that's where I get mixed up. And it's like, so even by saying we want the police as one, that means bringing guns into those communities. And that's not what I want to do. I want to redefine what policing is into fighting the causations of crimes, not the symptoms of crimes. Yeah. So that will change the fundamentals so much, the dynamic so much, that I don't know if I can even really define what I'm saying there in a way that we can all get, because we want to say police, and then the idea that I'm talking about you, not me, is going to mixes up the message.
Well, look, it's visionary, and I mean that in the best sense. I mean, you are thinking about a different society, and so we can't expect you to have all the answers. I mean, this is the thing that's been thrown out against socialists and libertarians, both actually, as a matter of fact, which is kind of a stupid argument. I mean, because what you really are doing is saying, here's the next thing I want to do, and here's my general idea about what it might look like down the road. But right now, let's go toward this thing, okay? And I have been thinking just in the last year or two that this is kind of maybe the problem with Black Lives Matter, is that they're not radical enough in that they're not doing this kind of thinking. Now, a lot of them do.
I think it's the decentralization. So
a lot of them do say things like abolition of police, okay? But they kind of leave it there. And so people immediately, they're just leaving themselves open to the charge of, well, that's crazy. That's not going to work. You can't do that. And then they kind of lose the argument, or people just walk away from it. So I do think it's actually essential to start to do at least what you're doing, to at least think about this. You may not have exactly the right answer, but I do think that's what needs to be done. And lately, I've been looking for historical examples in the United States of people in inner cities, taking on policing themselves. And I got to say, it ain't too many. Now, the Black Panthers did a little bit of that in certain chapters. There was one, I think it was in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. The Black Panthers in Winston-Salem had a very elaborate sort of social welfare organization, and they did, it wasn't exactly policing, but they did provide security. I think it was for the elderly in like whatever the, predominantly, the poor neighborhood.
Yeah, they did work. There's guardian
yeah.
angels too.
Yeah. And in fact, I mean, in a sense, that's how the Panthers started, right? By doing the patrols in Oakland with the rifles. It was protecting people from
wouldn't have missed that. I wish that could come back.
Yeah, well, at least that part of the Panthers for sure.
Totally.
Yeah, the Panthers are a mixed bag. I mean, there were some just straight up evil, violent criminals in the Panthers, rapists and murderers, but people use that fact to dismiss the whole thing. And there was a lot in there in what the Panthers did that people actually of all political persuasions can look to as models. I mean, conservatives.
So
what you're saying, by the way, is classical conservatism. It's not.
It is.
It's not
yes, I'm trying to get people to say that.
Yeah, it's not Republican Party conservatism, which is not conservatism. Edmund Burke, the godfather, the grandfather, the inventor, the originator of what we call classical conservatism, he sketched out this vision, which looks a lot like yours, which was like this, was communities organically developing over time and determining on their own how to operate and to provide their own security. So he was actually an anti-imperialist for that very reason, right? He wanted local communities to determine how they live. So, yeah, I think that Black Lives Matter needs to at least, I don't want to tell them what the answer should be. That's up to them to determine, but they need to at least start to think in the way that you're thinking, or at least start to provide those answers. And I am with you on this, though, on the answer. Generally speaking, I think as long as I have a choice to not live in San Diego County when their local policing is not so fun, like when they prohibit all the fun stuff, for instance, right? I think that we need to simply take the cops out of the neighborhoods, and that's not an invitation to the communities to police themselves. It's actually, you're forcing them to police themselves, and that's the hard part. I actually think communities need to be forced to police themselves if they're going to complain about the cops, and I think they should. Right? I think what you're sketching out would force them to do that in a sense.
Yeah, I think they want to. I don't think it would take much of a push at all.
Some do and some don't, right? I mean, some people do and some people don't. I'm not sure I would want to do that, be a cop in any way. But I just don't see any other way to provide security without a formal state police force than what you're doing, than what you're calling for.
Yeah, we're just not that unsecure. Like, that's also like a huge thing we get into. It's just like, what is our security? It's like, I don't know. We're pretty safe, guys.
Yeah,
like,
I agree. Yeah.
There's no reason to panic about any of our risk levels right now.
Yeah, no, it's true. No, it's true. I mean, because the news only talks about the worst murders. We think we're surrounded by murderers all the time, right? And terrorists too, right? No, I agree with you. Well, man, I do think we did a lot.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to end up doing this. Seriously, is what we're going to have to do.
Did a lot here. And I'm glad we didn't hit a total third rail. There may be one out there.
We still got Standing Rock. We still got we got nuances. Yeah. I think we're just going to have to do it later.
But look, seriously, I think there's a new analysis on the table here from what we just did, and I think it's most exciting that we actually there's a new, at least, question being asked about how to restructure things and the beginnings of a new answer. Really, I haven't really had this conversation about this thing with anybody else. And I talk a lot about criminal justice stuff with people, with experts, and they don't go down that road. Again, I'm not sure totally that I'm with you on your precise answer, but I like it.
Keep working at it. Let's iron it out.
And it's new. And
influence it.
And I don't even know how to categorize you anymore, which I also love. So thanks for everything.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I'm going to take that as a compliment too. Uncategorizable. That would be a pride I would wear.
You should. You're unregistered and uncategorizable.
Oh, that was so...
I know. I
forgot that was the title of the...
That was radio. I take that back. That was corny. All right, man.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. This was the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. If you like what you just heard and think it's worth supporting, please visit thaddeusrussell.com/support, where you'll be able to personally help in a real way to keep this show going. You can also help by going to thaddeusrussell.com/Amazon whenever you want to make a purchase on Amazon.com. Also be sure to check out the notes and links for each episode at thaddeusrussell.com/podcast. Thanks for listening.